Okay, we have a very full meeting tonight. There is a sign-up sheet on the podium. If you'd like to make a comment, it just helps the meeting run a little smoother. People sign up ahead of time with their name and their address, and that way we'll get you spelled correctly in the minutes. I would like to ask if there's someone who would make a motion to change the agenda, and I'm recommending that we flip 2 items. So the first resolution is about the theological seminary and creating that as a redevelopment zone. And I recommend that we move that up and move down the ordinance about the new neighborhood residential zoning.
I'll move that.
Okay, so did everybody understand that? We're just flipping those 2 items.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Liverman. All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, hopefully this will just get us there a little bit earlier for folks who are here for the seminary. And we've heard from ZARC, which is a zoning amendment review committee, that they have some comments on the neighborhood character ordinance. So we'll have a presentation on that tonight, but we're going to be putting it on the October 22nd meeting again for introduction. So that's why we're moving that down. Okay, so we'll start with announcements, and I'll start on my right. Any announcements?
No announcements.
Nope. Nope. Ms. Kremler? Mr. Quinn?
Just point out what a great mayor's ride we had yesterday.
Yeah, thank you to the Bike Advisory Committee and everybody who helped to plan that. Ms. Fraga, any announcements or any?
Just remembered one.
Okay.
And you know this one. The Sustainable Princeton's going to be checking compost bins, and it's part of our effort to address the problem of contamination in both our compost program and recycling. So I'm just taking this opportunity with a large audience to remind people that plastic bags are not allowed in compost, and we're going to be trying to make an effort to raise public awareness and also stop picking up people's recycling if they have plastic bags and other contaminants in them.
Thank you. Any staff announcements?
2 announcements from engineering. We've been notified by Mercer County that a portion of Cherry Valley Road will be closed beginning on or about October 22nd. This is a piece of Cherry Valley Road between Great Road and Province Line Road. There is an existing bridge that will be replaced by the county. The road will be closed for 3 months, and a detour will be set in place. Also, New Jersey Department of Transportation has notified us that there's going to be a 1-week closure of 206 up near Hillside Avenue beginning on November 8th, and that's only a 1-week closure. So we'll put those both on the website.
Okay, thank you. Any other staff announcements? Nope. Okay. Then we'll move on to the minutes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes in block with those who were attending the meetings voting on them and those who were absent abstaining.
Second.
Okay, so it's moved by Ms. Kremler, seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any corrections on the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, minutes passed unanimously. Next we come to proclamation. October 10th, 2018 is International Walk and Bike to School Day in Princeton, New Jersey, and actually the schools are celebrating it all this week. So if you have a child in school, please consider taking them to school by foot or by bike this week, and every week that I'll just ask that when the weather cooperates that you do that. And next we come to our presentation this evening, and I do want to welcome Assemblyman Dan Benson is here, and also our Assemblyman Roy Fryman is here too. We appreciate your presence this evening. And I'd like to invite up Tom Clark from New Jersey Transit to give a report on what's happening with the Dinky service and positive train control.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for the invitation, Mayor, Council President, Council members. We appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you about positive train control. Let's see, we got. How come we're stuck? Not coming up on the screen? Okay. Okay, I need can you bring it to the slide presentation screen? So it's bigger?
No, that's, well, this is a PowerPoint?
Right. The way it was before, it took up the whole screen. There you go. Okay, I think we've overcome our technical difficulty. Okay, we want to talk to you tonight about positive train control. For those who may not know what positive train control is, it's a federally mandated control system for trains operating on high-volume line tracks that will enforce speeds and signal requirements. This system uses integrated track-mounted devices on board computer systems and trackside radios to operate. This is a system that was put together back in 2008 when Congress passed this law that trains had to be implemented with PTC on their systems. It's been extended a number of times, but currently we are in the final phase of the deadline, December 31st of 2018. Now, why is the Dinky exempt from positive train control? I think a lot of people would be asking that question. Well, let's explain what the Dinky line is. It's classified as a non-mainline track, meaning it's isolated from other trains. The single Dinky train has exclusive use of the tracks and therefore is not subject to PTC designation and installation. I think everyone is very familiar with the Dinky system. It's a single track. It goes back and forth. It's a pretty simple system, and therefore the federal government saw fit to give it an exemption from positive train control installation. So the question is, the Dinky's exempt. Why does New Jersey need to temporarily discontinue the service? And this basically gives it to you in a nutshell. There's an entire map here of our extensive system, hundreds of miles of track. We have hundreds of locomotives that need to be updated, tested. It's a massive job. In the beginning of this year, our executive director came on board, and we were only at 12% of where we needed to be. We've made a lot of progress since then. We are now at about 70% through this project. The final 30% is going to be a really tough hurdle to meet the deadline. Therefore, our rail service planning people and senior staff infrastructure people looked at this very closely and see what had to be done in order for us to meet this federal mandate of December 31st. So, behind the scenes, our rail people are very busy. There's a lot of equipment being moved around to all different facilities that are located in Piscataway, Morristown, and Kearney. They're moving equipment, testing equipment, bringing it back to the yards. This is on a daily basis, and at the same time, we are still trying to operate a level of service for our customers. Now, we've already made some adjustments to our service calendar. We needed to make further adjustments because of the deadline approaching. And we had to make some really tough, hard decisions. The crews are needed from the dinky, the equipment, in order to help us meet this deadline of December 31st. It's not a decision that we wanted to make, it's one that we have to make. If we don't meet this federal deadline, New Jersey Transit can receive some substantial fines from the federal government, and we're doing our very, very best not to fall into that position. So what's different about what we're going to do now than in previous outages when the dinky was out for a week or two, and we ran temporary bus service? Well, what we've done this time, and this had a lot of conversations to do with your mayor and her insistence that we put some kind of a schedule together to meet and to make it known for the riders that they have a good, reliable bus service so they can get to the Northeast Corridor, and we took that to heart. We basically have put a schedule together that mirrors the dinky schedule. Yes, it's going to take a little bit longer on some of the trains to get there, but this is what we had to do so that we could use this equipment and the crews. And I want you to notice that this here bus service is not like it used to be when we had our regular outages. We would be out for 2 weeks, and we really had no schedule. We basically had no drivers, we had no equipment, because on a daily basis, it would basically come down to the garage dispatchers to say, well, the dinky's out today, are you available to drive a bus? Can we get that bus from over there to over here? And sometimes we failed on that because there was no drivers available or equipment. This go around, we wanted to make sure that we had something that was rock solid. So what we've done in the Hamilton garage, we put these routes, these dinky line routes, up for bid. That guarantees that we're going to have drivers, we're going to have equipment, and this becomes a priority bus line. That means for any reason, if for some unknown reason that we lose some equipment, we lose a driver, calls out sick, we'll have the ability to keep this thing running because the changes will be made elsewhere in the system and not on this line. I also did want to thank our other partner that we have here in this area, Princeton University. Early on, we had discussions letting them know what was going to be happening, and they were very helpful in saying to us that if for whatever reason you have a problem with your fleets, you're out of bus, you're out of driver, give us a call and we'll make our Tiger fleet available to you. Now, that's a heck of an offer to receive, but we guaranteed them that we're really confident that we're going to be able to supply the service as advertised, and we shouldn't have to make that phone call. But I wanted to let you know it was very much appreciated on our end. Well, we apologize again. We know this is going to be an inconvenience. There's no doubt about it. We're not trying to hide that fact. We know this is an inconvenience. But it's something that, as I said, we need to do. And our senior management has recognized that, you know, you're going through an inconvenience. But we have to do it. So therefore, they've decided that it was only right that there be a 10% discount through the months of November, December, and January while the outages are occurring. It's a small way of compensating you, but we're doing our best. We're trying to run a system that is old, and we're bringing it up to speed that the new federal guidelines are requiring. So in saying all that, Mayor, council members, I'm sure you have a lot of questions to ask of us in regards to this whole PTC. So Paul Wyckoff is here with me from New Jersey Transit. He's our Chief External Affairs and Government Community Relations person. So if you have any questions of either I or Paul, if he wants, Paul can jump in. We're more than happy to answer your questions, and if you see fit, Your residents have some questions, we'd be happy to answer those as well.
Okay, yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I want to thank you for coming here tonight. I know this is not probably the best job at New Jersey Transit tonight, and we appreciate the bus schedule as well, but there are real concerns that, you know, we're a small line and that we're absorbing what needs to be done in other parts of the system, and so it seems like the 2 cars that we have are probably not going to make a huge difference elsewhere, but taking those 2 cars from us are disrupting hundreds of lives, and I'm sure, hopefully you've received a petition that commuters signed. There's about 500 signatures on that, and I think some of the people who signed that are in the room tonight. I don't know if there's a possibility for a compromise. This was suggested by one commuter that we leave 1 car here and run the Dinky as 1 crowded car, and then use, if you need a car to help with substituting on other lines, that car goes there, but at least that we'd still have some service running during the period when the upgrades are being done.
Well, we hear you. Unfortunately, it's not just the equipment, it's the manpower that's behind the whole Dinky operation that's going to be used also to help us meet the federal deadline. So it's a combination of equipment and personnel. And we've made changes also on the Atlantic City Rail line, as you're well aware of. There's outages on the Passac Valley line on the weekends, basically so we could take that personnel, that equipment, utilize it in other areas so that we can have more people available for the PTC installation.
Ms. Carmiller?
Yeah, I was going to say the benefit to New Jersey Transit seems dinky, but to us, it's an enormous, it is an enormous burden. But I understand the position you're in, but I can't let the meeting go on without mentioning that it was troubling, especially as elected officials, to find out that we're actually not getting any benefit from this. We're not, and it was implied. I know it was in the, if you read the New Jersey Transit's communications carefully, you could say, oh, you know what, it doesn't say that the Dinky's not getting positive train control, but no one told us that. And there was also a letter, I don't have a copy of it, but I saw it to the people who park in West Windsor about it, and it also it implied that we were getting positive train control, and it would have been, so it really made things worse to feel a little bit like we were hoodwinked, because we probably would have started complaining earlier had we known. So I don't understand how that happened. I feel like there was either a lack of communication or something, so that we had to find out really by pressing ourselves for the answers.
Well, I appreciate those comments, and perhaps we could have done a better job in communicating the exact extent of what was happening with the PTC on the Dinky line early on. So, lesson learned, and we want to thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for coming on relatively short notice, and I share the concern of my colleagues. And I also can't help but think, as many of our constituents do, that this represents sort of a retrenchment on New Jersey Transit's part where the Dinky line is concerned, that this is just a step that is testing to make the Dinky go away. And I know you've heard similar concerns in Atlantic City about that line going away. So is NJ Transit prepared to commit with the strongest language possible to continuation of the Dinky in perpetuity, or for as long as you could commit?
Councilman, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, I was here talking in regards to the Dinky, in regards to the new train terminal that was being constructed at that time. There was concerns that it was a move by New Jersey Transit to begin the process of terminating that service. I stood in the old town hall and basically assured everyone that the Dinky wasn't going anywhere. It's coming back. I am prepared to tell you today that the dinky is not going anywhere, and it's coming back once this PT installation is complete.
Okay, because you can see where we would have those concerns.
Absolutely. I
Despite the
understand.
fact that that you've invested in infrastructure out there. We know that ridership after the movement of the terminal has been generally down, and there's a lot of concern that this is just going to turn into a bus route, which is would be in my opinion a disaster for the town. So
Okay.
Yeah, I wonder if you or your colleague could comment about what kinds of overtime policies are in place for your train crews. In other words, what have you done to try to solve the personnel needs outside of taking personnel from the dinky routes to meet your needs throughout the rest of the system?
It's a button.
Okay, absolutely. Now it's too loud. As you may have read, we have a severe engineer shortage right now, which has been a result of policies of the previous 8 years, failure to keep the pipeline filled with trainees. It's a rigorous training course. It takes about 20 months. And under this administration, we've doubled the number of classes. But the bottom line is we have about 335 men and women certified engineers now. We need 296 or so on a given day to run our 690 or so trains. Well, as you know, people get sick, people are out on medical, people are out on disability, whatever, and so we've had shortages. Basically, not only the engineers, but the folks who are out installing equipment on the rights of way and the signal technicians are all working the maximum number of hours they can under federal guidelines. Railroad personnel are sort of like airline personnel. There are hours of service limits. Everybody is essentially working their max. And your question's a good one. It's, as Councilman Quinn noted, we've heard the same basic concerns down in Atlantic City and also on the Gladstone branch, where on weekends we're going to be running buses. We are using everybody we can, as many hours as we can, to make the deadline. That's, in fact, the executive director was in Washington testifying before the Senate last week, and that was his bottom line message. And to Councilman Quinn's concern and everyone else's concern, the executive director also appeared in front of Chairman Benson's committee back in August, I think on the 16th, and he and the DOT commissioner were asked that very same question numerous times, and they said flat out, the service adjustments will be coming back once PTC, once we hit our milestone and get the implementation. So there is no backing off that in terms of the dinky.
Thank you, and I appreciate how forthright you've been, but that in some ways just magnifies my frustration that we gave the public bad information at the last meeting. We told the public that this was required by federal law, and I don't understand how we got into that situation where it wasn't made clear that that was not the case.
Well, again, we apologize for any miscommunication, but it is the case that it's required by federal law for the equipment that's used on the dinky, and everywhere else around the state, the entire fleet.
But it's not required on the dinky line, as you started with the, in the presentation. So that's just a source of frustration that can't be, there has to be better communication, and that's not fair
Point
to the
taken.
public not to take. And my second point is I appreciate you reminding us, and it's important to note this, that this governor inherited many, many challenges at New Jersey Transit, and so you're scrambling to catch up. But it still feels like you mentioned that, basically the dinky, we're pitching in to help elsewhere. And can you give us any other time where anywhere else on the New Jersey Transit line there have been sacrifices to help this line? You know, when
To
there's,
help this line itself?
yeah, when the cars were down, did they borrow from other lines? Did they, you know, are we always the people you go to make the sacrifice?
All I can tell you is that we are going all out to make the deadline, and failure is not an option. The rail staff put together the plan to best meet that. What it will benefit is, I know many of the riders take the dinky, obviously, to the Northeast Corridor and go to New York or Philly or whatever. Certainly having those engineers, and with such a shortage of staff, 3-4 engineers makes a major difference. We just had in fact, if I can digress for just a moment, last month we had a class graduate, 6 new engineers. And it instantly cut the number of annulments that we were having in August about in half, because each engineer usually runs, not the dinky engineers, because they run many runs, but out on the main line, they'll run 4 to 6 trains a day, right? So one engineer, being one engineer short, 6 trains canceled. To the extent that those engineers are now available, they free up other engineers, and service on the Northeast Corridor should be more reliable than it otherwise would be.
One more question. I know that schedules are notoriously difficult to meet for these kinds of projects. I guess the first part of the question is the deadline, the federal deadline is the end of January, is that correct? Or
December 31st.
okay, but we're going to have outage through January. Can you explain, I mean, why the outage continues after the federal deadline? And I guess the second part of the question is, what's your worst case scenario for when the work will get finished? Not what's the estimated schedule, but the worst case scenario.
Okay, two answers to that. First, we're anticipating being back in January. We don't know when, but certainly it is our intention to be as soon as possible after we hit our milestones, which is equipping a certain number of locomotives by that deadline, finishing the installation of equipment along the rights-of-way on other lines, getting the signals in, getting the transponders in, all that sort of thing. Let me put it to you this way. The executive director and the DOT commissioner have been very, very intense with staff to say that this is not an ordinary project, and we've all seen them, whether it be in transit or transportation, roads, whatever, or even, you know, getting the kitchen redone. Things drag. This is not an ordinary project. The deadline we've heard from the federal government is absolute. There are no extensions. And the fines are daily and huge if we don't meet the deadline. So we're not thinking about a worst case scenario. We are just totally focused on getting it done.
I had another question. So my understanding, just to review, is that you're going to be outsourcing the bus, you're going to be hiring a third party?
No, no.
Okay.
Let me, if you're a bus operator, you're a member of the union. They bid for their routes. Every time there's a schedule change, which in bus is at least twice a year, usually 3 times, and say that Tom has a route that I want. I have more seniority than him. I bump him out. You know, I bid for that route. I get it. Same thing with the engineers, by the way. The dinky is considered a prize assignment, actually. So when he says drivers will bid for it, instead of an ad hoc sort of service, Tom, can you run over and do the dinky for the day? Dedicated people who have that slot, men and women operators who have that slot, that's their assignment for the duration. And if they don't, if somebody, you know, has a family emergency or whatever, and we have a vacancy, the garage in Hamilton will pull a driver from one of the other routes and a bus and make sure that it's covered.
Thank you for explaining that. So these will be clearly identified NJ Transit buses?
Oh, yes.
That will have
Yep.
the sign saying phony dinky service or temporary dinky service?
Well, and that's a good point.
Phony was not the right word.
Tom,
I'm
tell them
sorry.
about what customer service will do the first couple days to ease the transition.
Yes, they will be our buses there. You'll see our wrap, just as you normally see our buses. They will be there. We are also planning on having some ambassadors, as we call them. They're basically customer service representatives to be out there when we begin this change, to advise and to talk with the people and guide them and tell them what they need to do. We'll have printed schedules on panel cards, as many of you may have seen before. It's very handy. You can fold it, keep it in your pocket. You'll always know what the schedule is. They'll be there handing those out and making sure everyone is aware of what's going to be happening for the next 3 months so they can make their
And
adjustments.
just one more question, Mayor, I'm sorry. So frustration of people who take the dinky is that often it's time so that the trains coming on the Northeast Corridor arrive, so you get off your train from New York or from Philadelphia and you get on the dinky. And if the trains in New York or coming from Philadelphia are delayed, are the buses going to stay there, or is it just you're going to have to catch the next bus?
Well, we are aware there are delays on the systems from time to time, and trains don't always make their connections. But that's part of life in the railroad business, that there could be potential delays, and they don't always make their connections. But this bus schedule has been set up to mirror the current dinky. So it's going to operate exactly the same. Whether there's a problem on the Northeast Corridor, it would still affect the buses the same way as if the dinky was running.
Ms.
Yeah,
Wilmer?
yeah, thank you so much. The only question I have is in regard to cost. Is it the same exact cost for the bus as it would be for the dinky?
Everything is going to be the same, except beginning in November, you'll have the 10% discount that will be offered to the ticket price.
Yeah, basically, you'll use your rail pass or your rail ticket on the bus. That's what you don't have to buy a special bus ticket, in other words.
Okay. Before I open it up to public comment, I just wanted to give our two assemblymen a chance if they had any questions. New Jersey Transit. Yeah, Assemblyman Fryman.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to acknowledge Assemblyman Benson. He is the chair of the Transportation Committee, so thank you for being here and supporting this issue. I, like you, are incredibly frustrated by this, not to be consulted but informed of this decision at the late hour is beyond frustrating on this. To be told that you have this incredibly complex project plan, that you have a hard deadline that has to be met, which we recognize, and that we're rushing to make it because of significant mismanagement that has taken place up until this point, and that the dinky is the savior to this master plan, is really hard to wrap your head around. But that's really what's being put forth here. And we're being informed, this community is being informed that is the facts, and without being consulted and having a chance to interact and work up other solutions. So some of the questions that have already been addressed, you basically have said to us that you anticipate service being restored sometime in January, is the goal, and that's the expectation. The other thing is there's significant pain points associated with this, switching from the rail to buses. And the two that come to mind is the additional traffic that it's going to be added to the roads and the burning of fossil fuel, diesel, from these buses that we don't want. So what other choices do we have? Can we get buses that are clean during this time? Can we? And if New Jersey Transit doesn't have them, let's go get some on loaner. Let's go work with manufacturers that have them out there and ask them to bring them into the system for these months and try them out. A perfect opportunity to try them right here so we're not adding to the pollution in this area.
Yes, Assemblyman, currently New Jersey Transit does operate a cleaner burning vehicle. It's on the Route 9 corridor. we have compressed natural gas in our buses that operate on that corridor. Unfortunately, we don't have any facilities in this area that can operate and service and maintain those vehicles. So an option to bring that equipment over here currently doesn't exist. We hear what you're saying about the request for cleaner burning vehicles, maybe electric vehicles. That's something that we're going to bring back and have a discussion on and see what we can do on the long-term plan as we look into this region for transportation purposes. We hear the community is saying there's got to be another alternative.
And I'm not talking about long-term. I'm talking immediately taking a look at this, because immediately the dinky is being shut down. So long-term, long-term, the dinky is coming back, you told us. So we don't need this long-term.
Well, short-term, I don't think we can find anything to make it work. And this is coming up beginning on Sunday. So it's nearly impossible. We've gone through great efforts to get these buses set up the way we have. If we had the vehicles and we had that equipment, I don't think we'd be having this discussion, but unfortunately we don't. But that's something we certainly want to bring back to our senior management and have a discussion with, so we could do in the future. I mean, that's
Mr.
the best I
Wyckoff,
can offer you.
can we have a discussion about this?
Yeah, excuse me, absolutely. Today is Wednesday, so we'll have Monday. It feels like Wednesday. It's been a long year. So we will bring this back to bus leadership tomorrow morning. In fact, I'll probably call the head of bus tonight to give him the news that he needs to take a look, and we'll get an answer to you through your office and through Chairman Benson's and the mayor's office, hopefully within a few days.
Thank you. My last question deals with ensuring that there are no riders left behind, and the capacity associated with the buses. How are we going to give assurances to the ridership that we'll have the right capacity during the peak times?
As I said, the schedule's been set up to mirror the dinky, so that means during certain rush hours, there's more than probably one bus can hold. There will be at least 2 buses at those periods to make sure if everyone doesn't fit on one bus, they'll be able to get onto the second bus. So everyone who wants a seat will find a seat.
Okay. Chairman, do you have any questions?
I want to thank the mayor and council. As a former local elected official, I understand the frustration, and as chairman of transportation, I'm frustrated too. Our assemblyman here has been very able, as a member of that committee, and has been working. He was part of the hearing that we had in August on the service disruptions all across the lines. And at that time, we talked about the Atlantic City disruption. This wasn't even on that agenda at that time. So that's why when we heard about this, how surprised we were. Like you, I initially had that same thought about positive train control being on here. And I get the distinction between the cars will have to have it, but not the line itself. But again, we're not benefiting here in this local community. And I think that distinction really has to be made. I do appreciate that those commuters to New York will hopefully see some benefit. We don't know yet. That's little to be seen. But the one thing that we did get out of that hearing was a commitment from the New Jersey Transit Executive Director Corbett and the chairman of the board, chairwoman of the board, which is the DOT Commissioner, Diane Scacchetti, that this line, as well as Atlantic City and any other line that was disrupted, would return as soon as they could after meeting the deadline. And I think that's a commitment, and we're prepared on the assembly side as chair to hold hearings as we get closer in December or that first meeting we have in January to ensure that not only are we meeting the deadline, but that service is returned as soon as possible. So we're going to continue to stay on top of that. We don't take anything for granted. Our committee has that oversight ability on DOT and New Jersey Transit, and we'll be using that authority. So beyond that, I just wanted to let you know that, we don't view this as just taking it as face value what we're hearing tonight. We will continue to keep their feet to the fire as the federal government is doing that to us.
Thank you, Assemblyman.
If I could just add one thing. I do want to thank the assemblyman and the chairman and their colleagues as well as the governor's office, because this year, for the first time, we've had not as much as any of us probably would like, but a significant infusion in the state budget, in state support, which is mitigating a lot of problems that have built up over the years, is allowing us to hire a lot of folks, including 4 engineering training classes a year, foremen for out on the line, bus operators, and so on. So I think I forget whether it was Director Corbett or Commissioner Scacchetti said, you can't turn a battleship around in a moment, but the ship has started to turn. And we appreciate your continued support.
And I don't want to belabor, I know there's a lot of questions back here. I just want to say, and tomorrow there will be a announcement of the release of the audit for New Jersey Transit, and I think that's really important. From there will be a number of changes, not only within just the administration, but there'll be some legislative changes coming out to not only increase transparency, improve that communications that continues, unfortunately, I think, to not meet what our expectations are, either as elected officials or as riders. And also some changes in how we do management so that we can turn that ship around a little bit quicker than what we've seen in the first half of this year. So you'll be reading more about that tomorrow. The governor will be making an announcement along with Executive Director Corbett and other stakeholders, including the chairman, the Senate Chair of Transportation, and myself. So there's more on the wider system, because I know the folks here that are concerned about the dinky are also concerned about kind of the failures of service that we've seen in the last couple of years, and to know that not only it's important for us to make sure the dinky is back, but that we improve service and communication, which I think that's the key that we haven't seen yet, that we need to see more of. So that announcement will be tomorrow, and hopefully we'll continue to see things improve over that time. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Ms. Carmella?
Before we have public comment, I thought, why don't we vote on our resolution? It's the resolution protesting the proposal to suspend service on the Princeton Branch Dinky line. And rather than read it out loud, it's in.
All right, so
on the
that's a
agenda.
motion, and is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion from council? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I would like to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions for the New Jersey Transit representatives. And, okay, yeah, so I'd ask people to line up, and then if you could state your name and address, and we're going to move the sign-up sheet just to make sure. If you signed it already, don't worry about it. If you haven't signed it, can you just make sure that you sign it so that we have your name and address spelled correctly? This is a really important issue. At the same time, we have a full room and a really full agenda, so I'd ask that people not repeat questions or comments they've heard already, and to, if you have a comment instead of a question, if you keep it to 3 minutes, please.
Sure, thank you. Many of us are skeptical of the bus service working right. So question on the schedule for peak hours. Are you willing to publish how many buses you're going to run at what time to assure us that we're not going to be left behind? In addition to that schedule, which I can't read, for the morning and evening hours, for example, are you going to have duplicate, triplicate buses for particular trains? I'd like to know that.
As I said, the bus service is being set up to mirror the dinky. Assemblyman did ask a question about capacity. During the peak rush hours, there will be more than one bus there, should overflow be needed, so that everyone who wants a seat can find a seat.
Yeah, I'm sorry. If I could just add one thing. One of the advantages bus has over rail is they can adjust very quickly. It's a lot easier to get another bus than it is to get another train to a certain site. One of the advantages of having ambassadors there the first week or so is that they will be on the radio, I guess, to the bus dispatcher and the central communications. If they see that conditions are such that the 2 buses that are there that are running between, say, 7 and 9 or 4 to 6:30 or whatever aren't enough, they'll get another one within 15 minutes.
And I would just ask, do you mind coming back up and stating your name for the record? I don't think we caught it.
Name's Anil Gokhale, 9 Flanders Valley.
Hi, good evening. My name is Andrew Ehrlichson. I live at 144 Hodge Road in Princeton, New Jersey. I'm also a member of the board of the Princeton Public Library. I've been riding the Dinky for quite a few years. I want to thank New Jersey Transit, Mr. Clark, Mr. is it Wyckoff for coming tonight. I think for anyone who rides the Dinky and NJ Transit in general, it's been a difficult time. People complain about it, as you know, all the time. Your reputation is pretty poor. There are lots of inconveniences on a daily basis, and the commute is quite long. It's nearly 2 hours for me to go from here to downtown Chelsea. And we know that you contend with certain difficulties. The Northeast Corridor line is the rails are owned by Amtrak, and they have priority on those lines, and difficult. However, this situation is avoidable, and it seems very disingenuous that you'd say that the positive train control has anything to do with this problem. There are 2 cars on this line. One of them is typically empty when it runs, so it essentially runs with 1 car and a second car for the convenience of perhaps the conductors or the engineer. The 2 cars are a very small percent of the rolling stock. I believe that this is the Arrow 3 type car that runs on this line. How many of those do you have? I'm curious about that, first of all.
It's an older fleet, the Arrows. I mean, they slowly have been being retired. I would guess to say there's probably somewhere between 100 and 200 of that stock still in.
Okay, we have 2 of them. And how many cars overall in the NJ Transit system?
Of regular passenger cars is somewhere a little over 1,000.
Okay, so if two cars, you're going to get 2 additional cars for a fleet of 1,000. Now this station, I looked it up in the Patch article from February 21st, is the 54th most popular station in terms of boardings in the system of 152 stations. So it's in the top third of stations. And yet you're going to inconvenience a station in the top third. There are 814 daily boardings in this station. It's not nearly one of the quietest stations in the system if you're looking to pull stock out or pull engineers away or shorten lines or something else. Also, I have trouble reading that schedule. What's the trip time on that schedule? What's the listed trip time on that schedule?
Well, it varies during the course
during the rush hour. I think I see.
It's somewhere around 15 minutes.
15 minutes. And normally the trip is 5 minutes. So that's 10 minutes additional twice a day. That's 100 minutes a week times the 800 customers. I come out to it's about 1,356 hours a week, or about 56.5 days a week of our time that you're going to take so that you can take cars from the 54th most popular station of your 150 stations. Now, you know, I think that what you should do is reverse the decision. I don't think it was a sensible decision. And I think that you have an opportunity here because NJ Transit is often seen as an organization that's not very responsive to its customers and doesn't really care. And you could show that you've thought about it and you've listened to the data and you've considered it and you've heard from our elected officials and that you've decided to do better. So that's it.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Anita Garoniak, 1 Harris Road. I'd like to read into the record a letter that I sent to the Executive Director of New Jersey Transit. Dear Mr. Corbett, this is Kevin Corbett. We are a nonprofit citizens group with a mission of preserving Princeton's rail link to Princeton Junction. We understand that New Jersey Transit plans to suspend service to Princeton of the Princeton branch for 3 months or more in order to use the equipment elsewhere during a system-wide installation of positive train control, PTC, technology. We ask that you reconsider this plan. Dinky service is an economical lifeline for the Princeton and the region. The service that the Princeton branch performs for commuters, occasional users, students, is a critical feature to our community's commitment to sustainable transit and to the support for mobility options that reduce reliance on the automobile. A months-long suspension of service will lead to major disruptions for dinky riders who will be forced to either drive to Princeton Junction or use bus alternatives with longer travel times. In addition to the immediate effects, the proposed lengthy suspension can be expected to result in a net loss of ridership with consequent negative impacts on the environment as former riders abandon mass transit in favor of the automobile. As you know, dinky ridership has never recovered from a net 22% loss that followed the station relocation. Because of the adverse effects of the proposed suspension, almost 500 of those riders have signed an online petition urging you to adopt an alternative plan. The petition reads, "We are among the many passengers who rely on the Princeton Branch Dinky train for the daily commutes to and from work or school, and who will be severely adversely affected by New Jersey Transit's announced plans to shut down this train service for 3 or more months, beginning in October. The provision of bus service to the Princeton Junction on a congested Alexander Road is not a substitute for a 4-minute train ride. Many of us will end up driving our cars at both personal expense and expense to the environment. If service is in fact shut down to free up Princeton branch equipment in connection with the installation of safety technology, we urge New Jersey Transit to find an alternative approach." And there's a link to the petition. "We ask that you listen to your riders and reverse the decision to suspend train service on the Princeton branch, and a plan that will inevitably discourage the use of Princeton's longtime mass transit link to the junction is not in the best interest of Princeton or the state and reflects a short-sighted allocation of public resources. Thank you for your attention to this letter. And you are all copied on this letter as well. So we sincerely hope that New Jersey Transit will reconsider. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eve Niedergang, 15 Forester Drive. I agree completely with the last two speakers. I feel like Princeton is being asked to pay for budget decisions that have been made over the last few years that are not our responsibility or our fault. But that isn't what I got up here to say. I'm concerned about the schedule here, which, although it's microscopic, there is a copy in the council agenda packet, and I see that you're allotting 15 minutes at rush hour, and I'm curious how this number was derived. Has somebody made this trip back and forth at those times? Because I tell my friends who come in at that time, you take the dinky, because I'm not crossing Route 1. It can take 45 minutes at times, so.
Yes. Our bus service planning people who set up the schedule, they do put a bus on the road during peak hours and different times of the day, and they do work the time schedule out based on real-time information.
Elizabeth Hamblett, 60 Whitmer Court. One thing as I'm sitting here tonight is I'm thinking to myself, I thought I saw that this rule was made in 2008, and here we are at the end of 2018 rushing to get the work done, and that's kind of hard to understand. I was also taken aback, I think, when Mayor Lempert mentioned that there were flyers put on the cars at the junction. So I commute twice a week. There is no notification anywhere at the Dinky station or on the trains that this is about to happen to us. My car is parked in that lot 2 days a week. I've had no notice about this. I am subscribed to the emails, and I am following you on Twitter. I have also tweeted back to say what's going on. There's no schedule, no response, no notification anywhere that this is about to happen to us. Now, I'm lucky I have a high school senior who can drive himself to school, leaving the house 15 minutes ahead of time or 20 minutes ahead of time to make sure I'm going to make that bus is not going to change my life that much, but it will families of people with younger kids. And so the communication has been non-existent. I can't call it bad. There is nothing from New Jersey Transit telling commuters that you guys are about to cut off our service, and that's unacceptable. There should be posters all over the station, all over, there should be sandwich boards where the tickets are sold. It should be on the train. I only know about it because the conductor mentioned it. I don't understand this. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
My name is Lisa Seriasol from 98 Olden Lane. I'm concerned about this replacement, not only from the standpoint of inefficiency, but from our carbon footprint. I have frequently found myself in the opposite direction of evening traffic going on Alexander, and have found that there is a complete backlog from Roselle Road all the way to the circle on top of the train tracks, which in trying to get to the station, I can imagine that those buses will be sitting in that same backlog. So I don't know how 15 minutes was calculated, but I really don't think that it's an accurate depiction. Leaving that aside, I'd like to ask if you're not able to bring in low emission or non-emission buses, that you somehow find some way to designate a bus lane where it's only buses that can then transit back and forth on a more efficient time schedule than sitting in traffic with the rest of the single occupancy vehicles that are in that traffic jam. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is James Harford, Jr., 601 Lake Drive. I have not been before this council since the unification of this town. I am outraged and furious. This issue is much bigger than Princeton. It's much bigger than Princeton University. It's much bigger than the state. It's much bigger than this nation. Now, someone here has just said, because of the last 8 years, we are stuck with a problem that was unresolved. I personally believe that this is a charade. This group here, who is representing the New Jersey Transit, is hoodwinking the entire council. And I do believe that that Princeton University has a responsibility to this issue as well. And I am just totally outraged. Mass transportation has been taken away from the public forum. I ride the bus to Trenton. I take the train from Trenton to Princeton. I do a circle with a bike. I do it for a reason. The bikes are not allowed on the trains during rush hour because there's no room. There's only 2 places for a bike on a bus. I am Mike Pence's worst nightmare. I do not want to drive a car. At age 17, I moved to Manhattan. I described Manhattan today, at the time that I got there, as Pompeii. Trenton is in better shape than Manhattan was in 1973. And shame on you all for failing to protect the 360 feet that Governor Christie promised that he was going to walk when Princeton University, allowed him to speak at the Woodrow Wilson School. Shame on you all. You failed to protect that 360 feet, and the engineers of America has failed to keep the trains modern.
Judith Meyer, 801 Mount Lucas Road. I'd like to know what kind of accommodations have been made for people with disabilities. How are wheelchair-bound people going to get on a bus, particularly if they have a suitcase? How are all of us going to get on the bus with suitcases? Princeton students go back and forth all the time. There's vacations coming. There's a fall break coming. This is outrageous at the very least. But what accommodation has been made for people who are disabled? They have access with the dinky, and they're not going to have that with the bus.
The buses that are going to be put in place are all ADA compliant.
Hello, I'm Troy. I was not going to come up here and speak, but based on how things have been going,
Can you share your last name also?
Biznansky. So I'm a full-time student at Drexel University in Philly, and I work at Princeton University for over a year now. And I feel that a lot of, not just the employees, but the students probably don't even know what's going on right now. So a lot when they'll go to take it, they're just going to notice that it's not there, and it's going to affect them. And for a lot of us, it's not about just a 10-minute difference in commute. It's how the ripple effect will affect all of our schedule. I know I wake up at 6 at the latest to get to work, and I'm already tired from classes all week. And based on the 15 minutes that it says rush hour, which is definitely not true, I commute every day, it's going to be problematic. I'll probably have to get up much earlier than that just to make sure that I'm there on time. And I don't think it will show poorly on NJ Transit. I think it'll show much more poorly towards the dinky itself. People might not even know to blame NJ Transit. They'll just blame the dinky, and maybe that will start some kind of effect that will minimize its use even more. So I just wanted to say that.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I want to thank the council for voting for the resolution. I think it's a very good resolution, but I would like to ask New Jersey Transit not to proceed with the suspension. Clearly, we're a drop in the bucket, and yet it's going to hurt a lot of people here in Princeton. I don't think people always realize, and I myself have had this experience of missing a very important meeting because of a delay from the train. We can't cope this way, and what happens is people have to either find alternative means of transportation when they can't afford to have a mess up, or they allow a lot of extra time. It's very stressful. It's really hurting our economy, and it's hurting us individually. So I just want to make that point really clearly, that this is not a small thing. Secondly, when we did have the suspension for the relocation of the station, we did lose a net 22% of our ridership. Many of the folks actually came back right after the station was moved, but then there were continued small disruptions continually, and people began to drift away and try to find some other way rather than use the dinky. So we've ended up with a net loss of 22%. It's going to happen again because this delay is going to cause people to be looking at alternatives. So it hurts us long term in maintaining the dinky, and it hurts New Jersey Transit, which is supposed to be in the train business. So I'm really concerned about that issue. And finally, it's no joke now about climate change. We have to move forward to find a better way to get around, and putting people back on the road is not the right way to go. You can imagine with 40,000 passengers per month going back and forth in the dinky, if all of them were forced onto the road, what kind of a mess we would be in, not to mention the air pollution and the greenhouse gas issue. So we need to get better about this. This is not a small thing, and we need to get everyone in New Jersey Transit focused on moving us forward, because we've wasted a lot of time. And now the change in climate is really on us, and we need to make real progress. Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. Okay, we can hear from 2 more people, and then I think we're going to need to move on, and hopefully you can take back to New Jersey Transit all of what you've heard tonight. Go ahead.
Good evening, John Kilbride from the Save the Dinky Committee. I have in my possession, as of this afternoon, 1,000 signatures from the dinky riders that were collected for the last 3 weeks. This is incidentally the second batch of petitions. The first one was confiscated by New Jersey Transit for some reason. So I will collate these things and make them available. And this is in addition to the 544 people that signed the online change.org petition. Thank you, and thank you for your support on the resolution.
Thank you.
Wait, can we get some clarity on whether that was a petition actually confiscated by the conductor on the train? And why is that?
I heard from a conductor that they were told by NJ Transit's management to remove the petitions.
Yeah, let me clarify that. The petitions which don't have a return on them, so we didn't know who to return them to, we don't allow petitions on the actual equipment that's on any line for any reason. So there were petitions actually on the car. In fact, I have them in my office. I was going to bring them tonight, and I forgot. I do, however, have the posters that people ripped off the train to make a sign this petition. That's in the back of my car. But the petitions unusually did not follow the normal petition form that we all know. There was no return, there was no way to get them back to anybody. But we don't allow petitions of any sort, no matter what there are for or against, on the actual train equipment, the buses, the light rail vehicles, the access link vehicles. That's the only reason. We certainly recognize everybody has a free speech right.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. My name is Trina Cuellar. I live on 33 Stewart Close, and I commute to New York City every day, 5 days a week. I leave before my family even gets up. I wake up at 5:30, and I rush out of the house. And I just wanted to get clarification on two things. One of them is timing. Again, NJ Transit trains are often running behind schedule. And if our train is only running, 5 minutes behind, our amazing dinky staff, the conductors and engineers, they know we're just trying to get home. And they'll wait that 5 minutes for us so we don't have to wait a half hour in the cold for the next dinky or call an Uber. Probably what I will do is end up driving to the junction because I need every minute. And so clarification on whether buses will, if they know our train, I mean, there's dispatchers, they know when trains are only a few minutes behind. Will they wait for the dinky or for the Northeast Corridor trains?
Yes, since the buses are operating and mirroring the dinky, they will operate the same way. If it's appropriate and they know there's a train coming in the next minute or two, they'll hold it back and wait for the train to come in.
Thank you. My second question that I was hoping to get clarification on is that I know this is a huge crunch and you need every person on board, but as part of maybe considering a compromise because this affects so many people of our community, would it be possible, for instance, that you said that engineers often run several different trains per day, that they could perhaps run the dinky during rush hour and then for the rest of their shift work on advancing the positive train control implementation?
Currently, what we have with our schedule, I mean, it's pretty much fixed. I appreciate your comments, but the way it's set up to operate right now and the equipment and the buses and the picks and everything's been set up, it's pretty much, set to go. So they've done a lot of work in planning it. There's years and years of experience.
Can you use your mic just so we can hear you?
There's years and years of people in our system, in our rail service planning, our bus operations, who have looked at this very closely, and they're confident that we're going to be able to supply the service that we're advertising.
Okay. Yeah, I want to thank you again for coming out tonight, and I hope we don't often have a full council room like this, and we all just implore you to take another look because of the impact this is going to have on our community. And I think we've heard also that we need to do a better job with getting the message out to commuters about what's going to happen. But before you do that, it would be great to take another look. I think you've heard some creative ideas here. I think we all understand the pressure that New Jersey Transit is under, but there might be a way to address those issues without having this giant negative impact on our community. So again, I want to thank you for coming out again tonight and for the bus schedule. And I don't know if any final words.
Mayor,
Right, thank you.
We want to thank you for your understanding And we're going to do our very best, and we want to also thank Assemblyman Benson and Freeman for coming tonight to listen to the residents' concerns, and we're going to do our very best to work with you all through this.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I also wanted to thank Dan and Roy for coming out tonight. We really appreciate it. And I also want to thank Princeton University for offering Tiger Transit and helping with this situation that we're all suffering from. I do want to move on, and Joel, you can speak, but I want to call up all the people who have signed up for public comment, and if you could just come to the microphone, because we are running a little over, and we have a really long agenda tonight. So Roberto Schiraldi, Patricia Saul, and Daniel Harris.
Thank you all. My name is Joel Schwartz. I live at 1 Armour Road. I'm glad to see that the Town Council is taking interest in the transportation and circulation implications of the Dinky issue. I hope that the Council will similarly take an interest in another issue that engages transportation, circulation, and safety issues. As you may know, there's a proposed grade 5-6 school proposed for the Valley Road site. Under the law, school is considered to be an inherently beneficial use, as are all schools. It's not yet clear what will be the nature of the review to be conducted by the Planning Board or any other persons or agencies of the town of Princeton regarding the proposed location of the school on the Valley Road site. I'm addressing the municipal issues. This has nothing to do with the school as a school board or public school issue. As you may know, in its recent approval of the proposed grade 5-6 school, the New Jersey Department of Education made no findings regarding the site suitability of that school. In essence, review and approval by the NJDOE Office of School Facilities is limited to what happens between the 4 walls of the building. Any and all issues of site suitability are outside the purview of the NJDOE review process. NJDOE considers such matters to be local issues upon which NJDOE makes no findings. I know what I just said to be true because I was told it by the director of facilities at NJDOE, the person who signed all those letters of approval. So, a number of questions are posed by the location of the proposed school immediately adjacent to Mercer Engine Company number 3, and in particular, the potential conflict of traffic movements involving vehicles leaving the proposed school site and emergency vehicles immediately next door. All school buses leaving the school, as well as any vehicles leaving the parking and drop-off area just south of the school, exit directly onto Witherspoon Street, just a few feet from the 4 truck bays of the firehouse. In addition, the proposed school site is less than 150 feet from the PFARS facility, whose emergency vehicles all exit directly onto Valley Road, as do all police vehicles directly across the street from PFARS. All the above raises a number of questions which I'd like to ask you. What persons or what agency, whether of the town of Princeton or any other body, will make findings and determinations regarding issues of safety of students, parents, teachers, and visitors, as well as the general public? 2, has a traffic study regarding these issues been performed by the town of Princeton or by persons, agencies affiliated with the town? 3, does the town of Princeton or persons or agencies affiliated with the town intend to conduct a traffic study regarding these issues? 4, while a courtesy review is typically the norm for new schools, who or what person or agency will determine whether a more thorough examination of the safety issues, i.e. more than a courtesy review, is warranted? 5, what land use approvals will be needed for the school and what land use approval process will be followed? 6, what findings should be made that any issues related to the proposed school will not negatively impact the performance of the 3 major emergency facilities given their close proximity to the school site? 7, if it's determined that the proximity of the proposed school to the emergency services will require the presence of police officers or other personnel to manage and direct traffic, whether during school arrival and departure times, evening events, or other special events, will the cost of such police officers or other personnel be borne by the municipality or the school district?
So can I just could cut you?
Bear
Okay.
with me, please bear with me one more moment.
Okay.
As you no doubt know, relatively simple land use applications, such as for a convenience store, a small office building, or small residential project, are typically required to perform detailed traffic studies, and the approving board hearings for those types of applications often take 2 or 3 or more approval board meetings. The scale of the 5-6 school, I'm almost done.
Yeah, there's
The
a big
scale-
line of people. I just want to be respectful of everyone. I can answer your questions. I can answer your
So
questions.
let me just,
All right,
please,
go ahead.
I'm just about done. The scale of the proposed 5-6 school, with a proposed enrollment of approximately 600 students, will generate considerably more vehicular and pedestrian traffic than nearly any other proposed land use application in Princeton in recent years. Given the proposed safety issues involved,
Okay, I want to be able to answer your questions, and we have a really long agenda. So do you want to hear an answer?
yes, I do. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you.
Okay, so the town has not received any application for the school yet. This is my understanding, and I don't know if, Trishka, you want to step in, but it would need to come before the planning board, and I believe that it's more than a courtesy review. Is that true? No, no, it is a courtesy review?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I'd like to
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
share a little bit because as council liaison to the planning board, there was discussion of this when the planning board considered the school's long-range plan. And the fact is that the Valley Road site, surprisingly, since there used to be a school there, is not identified in the master plan as a school site. Therefore, a school at this location would be a conditional use and would require, based on conclusion reached around the charter schools conditional use application to do their expansion that was done this year, the conclusion was reached that the schools would have to go for more than a courtesy review in that location.
My understanding, and that my expectation would be that we'd want to understand what the planning board would want to understand what the impact of the traffic was.
Right.
Your other questions were so specific, I think it's difficult for us to answer them
So
before we know what the plan is.
my
But
question-
I would say that this is really premature at this point, and that I just want you to respect all the people, if you just turn around and look at all the people who are waiting in line behind
seen
you.
that. Mayor, in a few weeks, we may well be voting on this issue. So my question to you is actually a bright line issue for exactly the reason you just mentioned. David or someone just indicated that under the law, this application is subject to a courtesy review.
No, that's not what we said. We said that it needs a planning board approval because it's a conditional use.
I'm trying, in order for this not to come up at the last minute, I'm raising this now months ahead of time for the following reasons. The potential safety issues are so large, I didn't want to see us get to the 11th hour. We just saw an 11th hour situation with New Jersey Transit. So given that convenience stores are subject often to lengthy reviews, I'm not looking for an answer tonight. I'm trying to raise the issue so that you guys can have the opportunity to decide
We appreciate
exactly
that.
what scope.
Thank you very, very much, but I
you.
would, I
Yeah,
think
but you have to- you have to-
I've been
you
really
have to-
generous with the time with you tonight,
Yeah,
but thank you.
Yeah, that's not fair.
I come in peace, too.
Well, I want to invite us all to take a collective deep breath because you all do not have easy jobs. So, Roberto Schiraldi, 107 Delamere. Again, I'm going to say, especially in light of all this stuff tonight that happened, thank you all for your service to this community, for sure. And especially from where I said thank you for your support of our efforts at racial justice in this community. So that's what I really came here to speak again about. First of all, I want to again acknowledge the land that we're on of the Lenni Lenape people that was stolen from them, and we're all here without permission, really. And also the ancestors and descendants of the enslaved Africans who built this community and who still contribute so much to it. So that's number one. This is Columbus Day, and I'm a full-blooded Italian, mother from Marsico Nuovo, my father, Paolo de Cole. I'm not proud to have Columbus celebrated. Columbus was one of the first to initiate the genocide of millions and millions of native people. So I would like to humbly ask that this body, I want to plant a seed that we consider what a lot of other states, and some of the folks behind me are going to say more about that, and other communities across the country have done, which is to, in lieu of Columbus Day, have Indigenous Peoples Day. And not just Indigenous Peoples Day, as some local Lenni Lenape folks reminded me, but that we make sure that in our schools, which we're going to be working on that too, because we don't just want one day or even a month. A month would be great too, but that we really do a much better job of teaching the accurate history of what really happened to the people here in New Jersey and across the country. So that'd be the thing that would ask us to consider maybe having an Indigenous Day minimally, or Indigenous Peoples History Month. And for my Italian brethren, we can have that for Italians too, folks. But at least, let's get right with what's really important here. I think that's mainly what I had to say. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time and for your big old hearts.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Patricia Saul. Thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for the work that you do. I'm new in town, having just moved here in January. I moved to Princeton for many reasons, but the most notable of them is that after much research, I found that Princeton had a population that I found more like-minded, progressive, and tuned into national issues than any other small town I could find. And as I was choosing my new home, I found that several other places that I was considering had adopted Indigenous Peoples Day as a holiday. Once I got here, I found out that Princeton surprisingly had not. And so I was wondering if Princeton is willing to join what is becoming a national movement towards Indigenous Peoples Day. You may or may not know that Indigenous Peoples Day has been adopted by many communities and states in our country. The reason for this is to recognize that there were people who lived on this land long before Columbus arrived. And also, as in the state of Minnesota, to eliminate systemic racism towards Indigenous peoples and to promote practices and policies that honor the state's Indigenous roots, history, and contributions, and reflect the experiences of Indigenous peoples. I'm now going to list all the states and cities that have adopted this day. When you hear me name all these places, I'm sure you'll want Princeton to join this group. The states are Minnesota, Vermont, Alaska, South Dakota. The cities, Los Angeles, California. Sorry, got to turn the page here because I didn't memorize this. Los Angeles County, California. Berkeley, Santa Cruz, San Fernando, Burbank, Long Beach, San Luis Obispo, Watsonville, moving to Washington State, Seattle, Olympia, Spokane, Bainbridge Island. Minnesota, we have Minneapolis, Grand Rapids, St. Paul, Denver, Colorado, Durango, Colorado, Boulder, Phoenix, Arizona, Ann Arbor, Traverse City, Michigan, East Lansing, Michigan, Ypsilanti, Albuquerque, New Mexico, Santa Fe, New Mexico, Portland, Oregon, Eugene, Oregon, Newstead, New York, Lewiston, New York, Ithaca, New York, Norman, Oklahoma, Tulsa, Oklahoma, Carrboro, North Carolina, Asheville, North Carolina, Belfast, Maine, Bangor, Maine, Brunswick, Maine, Portland, Maine, Cambridge, Massachusetts, Amherst, Massachusetts, Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. We want to be along with them. Lawrence, Kansas, Davenport, Iowa, Durham, New Hampshire, Moscow, Idaho, Oberlin, Ohio, Salt Lake City, Utah, Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, Madison, Wisconsin. I hope you'll consider us joining those list of cities, and thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
I can't see a thing. That's better. Madam Mayor, members of Princeton Council, good evening. It's appropriate on the day that has been called Columbus Day to celebrate people who were and still are better environmentalists than we are. We have still so much to learn. The peoples of this landmass between the Atlantic and Pacific, 6.7 million in North America alone. They have been here long before America was named as such in 1507. And then the waves of European immigrants who followed, subjecting them to horrid physical and cultural abuse, victimization, and extermination. Yet the indigenous people remain despite radical depletion. Few thrive. They suffer from food scarcity, freezing weather, a lack of adequate clothing, electricity, and fuel. The American Indian Educational Fund helps. The American Indian College Fund also. Fewer than 14% of indigenous people hold college degrees. But traditional peoples are rich. If we eat corn, potatoes, mushrooms, or beans, we once again devour the great skills in agricultural management of the indigenous peoples. We would not light Halloween candles with our children without indigenous crop management. Indigenous art is finally being recognized as such, particularly at the Denver Art Museum, where Nancy Blomberg, recently deceased, has pushed a movement for Indian artists to be recognized as artists rather than simply repeaters of, quote, traditional but, quote, lost artifacts. The ancient stoneworks in South and Central America are more skilled work than those at Messina. Wari textiles perhaps surpass those of the Caucasus. No early American European invasions could have happened without the canoe. In any case, the indigenous people are people like others in this room and this community. They deserve everyone's respect, recognition, and help. You have already heard the roster of towns, cities, municipalities, and states that have adopted an Indigenous Peoples Day or month. Perhaps it ought to be a year, as we ought perhaps also to have for, quote, Black People's Month. I am not asking Princeton Council to consider a resolution to establish an Indigenous Peoples Day or month for Princeton. I do request that Princeton Council consider the progressive role that Princeton itself can play in this important national conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Salma Hashim and I'm a senior at Princeton High School. Today, as many in this town know, is Columbus Day. However, over 58 cities celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day and 7 states do not celebrate either holiday. Today, we did not have school and everyone's ecstatic, but barely anyone in my school understands why. As a student, I'm heartbroken to hear my classmates say they think Native Americans are extinct or endangered. Native Americans, and specifically the Lenape people, are not invisible. They still live here in New Jersey and are just as significant, if not more, as us. Their rich history is forgotten in our schools. Last year, I took AP United States History. We learned about Native Americans and their agriculture skills, and we referred to them in the past tense. They used to inhabit this country, or there were so few that the Americas was virtually untouched by a human presence. There are 54,000 Native Americans in New Jersey and 4.5 million in this country. That number is too big to be invisible. Their struggles are reduced and the role of them as caretakers is constantly and habitually overlooked by society. Before the arrival of Europeans, cities and towns here were flourishing. I am proud of those 58 cities for being brave, bold, and conscious. They have taken a step towards educating the children in their town, and I hope we can consider expanding our school curriculums to add more accurate information on Native American history and current realities.
Thank you very much. So I want to thank everybody who spoke. I don't think this has been on our radar before, but I would recommend that Civil Rights Commission take a look, and I think it would make sense to bring it forward maybe before October of next year, and then in the meantime, there might be other, I think this is sort of a symbolic gesture, but maybe there's more substantive things that we could be working on as a community, and I'd ask Civil Rights Commission to do that. Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak as part of public comment for anything that's not already on the agenda? Okay, I'm going to close public comment, and then we'll move on to reports. And Mr. Huff, you're up with the bad news about our recycling contract for this year.
Good evening, everyone. Very quickly, as you know, we talked a couple months ago about the recycling bids that the county took in and the significant increase in the price for next year. We have had numerous conversations with them and meetings, and they have asked us to sign their service agreement, which I am recommending to you tonight to pass the resolution authorizing the agreement for the next 5 years. But what we have been able to get them to do in our contract or our agreement is agree that we have a 90-day out. So at any point towards the end of each year, if we can figure out and take bids in ourselves on a better method and cheaper method of collecting recycling, we have to give them 90 days notice, and we will be able to do that. As far as I know, we're the only municipality in the county that pushed them for this, but they did agree to it. We have the agreement that you have includes that in there, and I recommend tonight that you pass the resolution that allows us to sign that agreement and get it back to them. I can also tell you that last Thursday, Robbinsville did take in bids to do recycling on their own, and per unit or per house, it was an additional 34 cents above what the county bid was. That their number came in. It was the county bid this year for next year is $3.80 per unit, and the bid that they took in was $4.14, which was 34 cents more than what the county had, and it was 80 some odd cents higher than what Robbinsville currently was doing. So they're debating whether they're going to go back to the county or do it on their own. But bottom line, I recommend that you adopt the resolution tonight so that we can sign the agreement and have recycling next year.
Ms. Carmella?
Yeah, I just want to say that the Public Works Committee also supported this, and I'd like to make a motion that we pass the resolution authorizing and approving the shared service agreement between Princeton and Mercer County.
Second.
The resolution's been moved by Ms. Carmella and seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Thank you. And next we come to our ordinance introductions for tonight. Oh, reports. Thank you. We'll start, am I right, Mr. Cohen?
Just a very brief report. Small subcommittee met last week with the Friends of Harrington Woods. We're working on finalizing a contract with them for their renovations of the historic structures that are on the property, as well as subsequent arrangement for how they would manage the property once it's been renovated. So we have a term letter that Mark DeShield put together with help from the committee, and we seem to largely have buy-in from the board of the Friends of Harrington Woods. So we're moving forward at last with something that started last year and then sort of took a lull.
Thank you. Yes, I wanted to report, last week the Animal Control Advisory Committee met, and since we only meet once or twice a year, I thought it important to update people. It was sadly perhaps my last Animal Control Advisory Committee meeting, yes. We reviewed the data from last winter's hunt, and as you know, it was a more successful hunt than the previous year had been because of the weather. We ultimately resulted in culling 196 deer. That was in the winter of 2018. And our new animal control officer, not so new anymore, but Jim Ferry has really gotten into the job and is doing a great job. And he's already coming up with ways to ensure we're doing a better job of tracking how many deer are involved in motor vehicle accidents, because you no longer need to file a police report to file with your insurance company. And so just tracking police reports is going to undercount. So he's working with Access Princeton, and is going to also include the number of deer that get picked up on the site. So he's got a way to track complaints and add all that together. So we'll have better data going forward. Looking ahead to this year's plan, I wanted to note that Recreational hunting began on September 8th and seems, and is underway. The one change this year is that Herrontown Woods, now that it's municipally owned, is in the area where hunting is allowed. We also reviewed the white buffalo deer management proposal, and that would be for the hunt that would begin in January. The professional hunters, they have sampled our deer population, and they propose to cull between 250 and 300 deer this year. So a significant increase. But they think they need to do that to be able to manage the population, given how it's growing. And to increase the yield and have a more effective program, they will re-implement drop nets, which had been used, some of you will recall, were used in previous years, but were not used last year because we had a new animal control officer and who needed some training there. So that white buffalo contract will be on our agenda in one of the upcoming meetings and that hunt would start in January. We also revisited the issue of increased deer nuisance complaints from the Riverside area. That is the only area of town where we've been getting complaints. And White Buffalo and our animal control officer both believe that is likely due to the growth and meadow-like conditions on the empty Butler tract. And Jim Ferry has been in contact with Princeton University, and they are exploring whether hunting can be allowed on the Butler tract. Those are just conversations happening now. Finally, there will be a free rabies clinic at the main firehouse on November 3rd, 9 a.m. to noon. And this is really important because we've had several rabid bats and raccoons this year. So it's important to vaccinate all dogs and cats 3 months or older. Thank you.
I have a report, broken record on the proposal to study consolidation of facility staff or enhance shared services with the schools. So again, Mr. DeShield, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think in working out the governance issues as to how we're going to go about hiring the consultant who will do the study about whether there are potential savings and or greater efficiencies in consolidating facilities functions between the municipality and the schools, that we've decided to have a small working group of 2 council members and 2 members of the Board of Education work with staff to outline what the RFQ is going to be for that. And I see that you're nodding, which is a good thing because, as the liaison to the Board of Education, I would, of course, love to take this on, and I think it would be appropriate if the mayor or the council president would join me in these discussions. So,
thankfully, Ms. Krumler just volunteered.
Oh, wonderful.
I twisted her arm.
That was easy.
Yeah, so thank you to both of you, and look forward to moving forward on this important project. So thank you for your leadership on it, Tim.
Thank you, Mayor.
Ms. Frog, any reports? All right, I have a few quick reports. First is I attended a conference that the Watershed put on, Stony Brook Millstone Watershed Association, on new legislation regarding stormwater utilities, which hasn't been passed yet, but it was about what that might mean for municipalities. Jack West was there, lots of members of the Environmental Commission were there. So I think it's just an issue we should be aware of and to keep track, because it could be a great tool. The other thing I just wanted to let people know was the sign ordinance. So Josh Zinder has done a lot of work. It's been reviewed by HPC. It was reviewed by the Economic Development Committee, and I believe the next stop is ZARC. And hopefully that will be coming to council. If we don't have time before the end of this year, then early next year. If anybody needs to restore their soul, I recommend going to a place called the Poetry Trail in Princeton. This is a gift from Scott and Helen McVeigh. It's at the top of Greenway Meadows, and I was there over the weekend because a new poem was installed, and we did some proclamations for the artists who design the benches and also the artists who did the signs. And it's just, it's one of those hidden gems in Princeton. So there's 50 poems, and you walk along a nature trail, and it was a really beautiful event. So I encourage everybody to get out there while the weather's still nice. And then finally, it's hard to believe that it's almost the end of the year, but this is a time when we start thinking about what our goals are going to be for 2019. Every year we do the goal setting process a little bit differently. I thought this year we could try to set goals initially more along our strategic priorities. So in the past we've met with 2 big meetings with the chairs of our boards and commissions. This year I thought instead we could have meetings based on our strategic priorities and invite whatever committee chairs want to attend. So some might want to attend a couple meetings, some maybe only one. So I'm going to be working with Council President Krummeller, and we'll be sending something out soon to arrange for those dates. Are there any staff reports? Nope. Okay. Then we will move on to our ordinance introductions for tonight. First is 2018-21, an ordinance pursuant to NJSA 40A 12-13, authorizing the conveyance of a conservation easement for Block 7003, Lot 1, Princeton Tax Map, to the State of New Jersey, New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, its successors, and assigns. Is there supposed to be more, or is that the end of the sentence there? Okay. And this is essentially for the PFARS property located at the corner of Terhune Road and Valley Road.
I'll make a motion to pass.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by Ms. Krummeller and seconded by Mr. Cohen. Can we have like a brief explanation of this ordinance and the next one?
I mean, they're related to the PFARS project. Do you have the information? If not, I'll...
From what I understand, these are both required to complete the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection permitting for the new PFARS facility. There is a stream across the street to the west from the site that has an exceptional riparian zone designation with it, which extends into the site. And so in the undeveloped portion of the site, this is a deed restriction on the property.
Okay, thank you. Is there any further discussion or questions on this? Mr. Cohen?
I just, in reviewing the materials that were in the agenda packet, I could not read the plan to understand what section of the site was actually within the conservation easement. I don't know if any of the staff members know the answer to that, but if not, it would be good to get clarification before we vote on it in a month.
It's the only area that has grass there now. It's the area where the 3 big oak trees are, and it's kind of there to the traffic signal. It's basically everything that's not being used for parking or the fueling station or the building.
Okay, so, okay.
Any other comments or questions? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Krummeller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
The public hearing for this ordinance will be on October 22nd, 2018. Next is 2018-22, an ordinance pursuant to NJSA 40A 12-13, authorizing the conveyance of a stream corridor conservation easement to the Delaware and Raritan Canal Commission for Block 7003, Lot 1, Princeton Tax Map. And this refers to the same property, the PFARS property. Is there a motion to introduce?
I'll move it.
Moved by Mr. Cohen.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Liverman. Any other questions or comments on this ordinance? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Liverman?
Yes.
Ms. Krummeller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And the public hearing for this ordinance will also be on October 22nd, 2018. Next, we come to our parking ordinance, 2018-23, an ordinance concerning loading zones, parking and parking rates, and amending the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And since I just read it, can we have a motion to introduce in a second?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Quinn.
Second.
And seconded by Mr. Liverman. And turn it over to Allison.
For the first reading, we have the updates that we had discussed at the previous council meeting regarding the combining of the loading zones from the township and the borough, an introduction of the parking rates, as we had previously discussed, at $2.25 for the 2-hour parking, $1.50 for the 3-hour parking, 75 cents for the all-day parking meters, and a flat rate of $4 per hour for the long-term parking meters. We also included the no reparking ordinance in here as well, which would allow people to come back to the same block after leaving for a minimum of 2 hours. And we have the table for the new parking zones, the 2-hour, 3-hour, and all-day parking areas, as well as cleaning up some of the changes where you have borough listed or township listed. And I think those are the major.
Okay, and then for anybody new who hasn't been here for the last several weeks, this is not our first time with this material.
Or years.
Yeah.
So if you, that's part of the reason why probably there are not going to be a ton of questions from council or discussion, is that we've passed through a lot of this already. Mr. Cohen?
Just a quick correction. You misspoke and said $4 an hour for the long-term parking, and it's
I'm sorry, $4 per 24 hours, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up what I brought up last time, and I brought it up. I think that I would like to recommend that we take out the reparking portion of this ordinance. I feel that we did talk about doing incremental changes, and the parking meter hike and the changing of the changing zones is going to be a big change for our residents. And the reparking ordinance is, to me, like a sledgehammer. And we're not really sure how it's going to affect, how enforcing that is going to affect the demand for parking. I think we have an ecosystem right now, and I feel like why not take it in steps. Another major point is we have right now an ordinance already against meter feeding that we have not used. In fact, I just checked the last police report, and we've only given 4 tickets for meter feeding this entire year, and the 2 years previously, the year-to-date number was 0 for tickets for meter feeding. So what I would like to recommend is, instead of a new ordinance that's a new idea that's strange to most people, which is you can't repark in the same zone after 2 hours, why don't we start enforcing our meter feeding ordinance? That's an easier step. It eliminates the newness. It does the exact same thing that we want the no reparking ordinance to do. So I don't know why we don't just use the meter feeding ordinance instead of the no reparking ordinance. That way, as we were told in the beginning, the benefits of doing an incremental approach will accrue. We'll have the data. So the benefits of the new parking system is we will have be able to tell pretty much, what the effect of enforcing the meter feeding rule is, and we can decide later if we need to introduce the new no reparking ordinance. But we're going to have a lot of explaining to do. Which place is it that I can repark? Each area we're going to have to delineate, or we're going to have little signs on the corner. This is the end of this reparking area. It's complicated, and I think it's a bad idea. So I would like to propose an amendment to take that out.
Okay, and just before we have further discussion, are there any other items that are part of this that anybody wants to discuss, or is it just that, Mr. Quinn?
I did, Mayor, and it struck me as I was reading this over the weekend and looking at the meter holidays that I've raised this anecdotally. We're a town where we're fortunate to have sort of a robust celebration of Martin Luther King Jr. Day in January, and I'm wondering whether anyone else thinks there's value in making that a meter holiday.
Okay, are there any other issues? So we'll take these one at a time. So let's start with the,
Jenny's, I would second Jenny's motion. I think we felt, I think I missed a meeting at some point in here, but I thought we had decided that the technology wasn't sophisticated enough to really track, and so that maybe this is taking on something that's not yet ripe for addressing.
I'm trying to remember our conversation, but is there anybody else?
No, you did, and then it was brought
I think there are ways to track it. I think part of the issue is that one of the main motivators behind having 2-hour parking in the downtown is that you have circulation. And it's really to combat what's called the all-day parkers. And the all-day parkers tend to be people who work downtown who know how to work the system. And so the way you work the system at the moment, if you say you can't feed the meter, then you have a buddy, you go out and you swap cars or do something else. So it's an attempt to be a little bit smarter and try to stay one step ahead of people who are trying to game the system. But there are people who are not really trying to game the system, and we want to make sure they don't get caught up in this web. Mr. Khan?
Just a couple comments, because we did discuss this somewhat at the Public Works meeting today. One comment is, I believe that the new meter technology will essentially make meter feeding impossible. Allison, maybe you can correct that, so that in terms of enforcing meter feeding, it won't be an issue.
The 30-minute and 15-minute meters with the sensors will have a meter reset and an anti-meter feeding, meaning when a car, in order for the next person to feed the meter, the car needs to actually vacate the parking space. The short-term 2-hour and 3-hour parking meters will not be equipped with sensors at installations. So a lot of the no reparking and meter feeding is up to the enforcement efforts.
Second point that I wanted to make was that in the existing ordinance, Jenny's talking about this as being an introduction of a new concept in town, but in fact, in the existing ordinance, and we looked it up during the Public Works meeting, in the 2-hour unmetered spaces, which exist throughout the town, this is a rule that already exists. There is no reparking in those areas, and it's something that's been enforced, at least in my personal experience, in certain areas. So I don't think that it's going to be quite the shock that Jenny thinks it's going to be. And then the third point that I would make is that to the extent that this is not needed, it's not going to hurt anybody. So if it's a problem that's, if there's a solution looking for a problem, you put it on the books and there's just no downside to it, because it's not going to make anybody upset. The only people who will be upset are people who are already gaming the system, and I think that it makes sense to try and address that issue up front.
Mr. Quinn?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just repeat, Jenny and I have been around the block on this, no pun intended. And I just think that I think it's a good idea to do this. I think that it will, my hope is that it will free up spaces for people who are residents who are driving downtown to use the businesses. This came at the request of merchants who are really sort of know what the truth on the ground is, in my opinion. And I also don't think it's sustainable to have people starting their cars up and driving them around the block every 2 hours, just so that when there are options that are cheaper and require just a short walk to a place where you can park your car once and stay there for as long as your shift is, or for as long as you desire.
Okay, so I was going to say, Ms. Krummelers made a motion to amend the ordinance to take out that section. Is there a second for that?
Well, Heather already did.
Oh, Heather seconded.
But
I seconded,
okay.
but
I still, no one has really answered my question or acknowledged that we have never enforced the meter feeding. And I can say in 2016, I was working full-time downtown, and I had a bright yellow car. And I parked it on Nassau Street and put quarters in it all day. And I only got tickets when I didn't put quarters in. I didn't get tickets for meter feeding. And and not only is that anecdotal, in the police reports, nobody enforces meter feeding. So simply enforcing meter feeding would accomplish all the goals everyone's talking about. So why don't we just do that? And I think there is a downside, and that's the complication of having certain areas that are no reparking areas. For people who haven't heard about this, there are going to be designated blocks or parts of blocks. I don't know how blocks are defined, that you can leave and then you can't go back to that place. You could go back to a different place. So we're going to have some kind of signage that tells what those zones are and some kind of explanation on each meter. And instead, we just say, we leave the no meter feeding signs and they're rules that everyone is familiar with, and enforce those rules. Now, if people feel like they want to do something new, that's what it feels like, just something new and different, just for the sake of doing this. Instead, let's just use the tool that's simple, that everyone knows about. Enforce the meter feeding rules. Why don't we just do that? Somebody answer me. Why don't we just enforce the meter rules?
I hope that's part of this program. But yes, Ms. Fraga?
Yes, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I understood that the meters or the different zones would have different colors, so there will be designations as to where the zones are?
Yeah, there will be different colors for each of the parking zones. So the 2-hour parking will be green, the 3-hour will be orange, and the all-day parking meters will be blue. And at the last meeting, when we had kind of pared down this overtime parking, no reparking ordinance, we had pared it down to same block. So you couldn't repark on the same block, which means you could technically turn the corner. If there's a parking space available, you could use that. But of the options, we didn't go with the whole zone.
Right. And I also thought that part of the discussion, we did discuss whether there should be the no reparking rule would be implemented now or wait till determine whether it's going to be an issue later on. And I thought that what we had decided was that it would be best to implement it now and not wait to see if there was an issue and then having to amend the ordinance later. At least that was my understanding.
Right, but I disagreed, and so I'm disagreeing again.
All right. So we have a motion and a second, and the motion is to remove this section from the ordinance. Does anybody have anything to say that hasn't already been said?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can we do a roll call? Because I think it's going to split where it'll be easier to tell if you do a roll call vote. So can you please call the roll on this one?
Mr. Cohen?
No to the amendment.
Ms. Howard?
Yes, the amendment.
Mr. Liverman?
I would say no.
Ms. Crummiller?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
No, with respect to the council president.
Ms. Fraga?
Say no to the amendment.
I've lost count, so can you?
It's 4 noes.
4 noes,
3
two yeses, 2 yeses. All right, so that amendment fails. And now we come to Mr. Quinn's, which I assume he's also suggesting as an amendment to the ordinance, which would be to include Martin Luther King Junior Day into the list of holidays where there would be free parking.
I'll suggest it as an amendment.
I'll second.
And is there a second to that? Second. Ms. Howard is the seconder tonight on this?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this? I would say it's actually a good suggestion because I've received some angry emails from people who had assumed it was a holiday, who were rudely surprised when they it was well enforced. There was a lot of parking enforcement that day. So all in favor of this amendment?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Is that clear where to stick that in?
Yes, it is.
In
It
the-
is in section 19-20. It's under E.
The list of holidays there, right?
Correct. So in addition to New Year's Day, Easter Sunday, Memorial Day, Independence Day, Labor Day, Thanksgiving Day, and Christmas Day, we will add in Martin Luther King Day.
Hopefully the stickers haven't already been printed, have
And
they?
it's somewhere else in the ordinance where we spell out the meter holidays.
We'll find it. I don't
Okay.
think for purposes of tonight, we have to, it's okay not to spell out the specific sections, just make it clear that you want that added.
Right, and I would say if we've already printed the stickers, to leave, that we haven't. Okay, excellent.
And also, those holidays will be on the screen, the meter screen.
Oh,
So
excellent.
what's going to happen is on the holiday, it will say, Happy Holidays, free parking today, and then
Great.
you'll be good to go.
Okay, terrific.
Madam Mayor, there are two other changes that we are recommending be made to the ordinance before you. Mr. Cohen had pointed out a couple of items for us that need slight changes to, that we want to bring to your attention. The first one is on page 14 of the ordinance. It's related to, it's at the very bottom of the page. It's the 2-hour parking on Whole Fish Street. We had been looking at expanding parking on Whole Fish to put a couple of spaces on the south side of the roadway, closer to Witherspoon Street, and upon field verification, we found that there's not enough width to the roadway in that location, so we are keeping with all of the parking on the south side. So we just need to amend that item where it says Whole Fish Street, both sides. It would become Whole Fish Street, north side between Chambers Street and Witherspoon Street. So that's one of the changes. And then the second change is on page 16. Just for more clarity's sake, we would be splitting up. We have an item in the middle of the page for the 2-hour meters on Palmer Square West, both sides between Nassau Street and Whole Fish Street. For point of clarity, we would take that row and split it into 2 rows. So it would read Palmer Square West, both sides between Palmer Square South and Whole Fish Street. And then the second row would be Palmer Square West, west side between Nassau Street and Palmer Square South. So it's just a point of clarification because you don't have parking on both sides of Palmer Square West for that entire stretch from Nassau to Whole Fish.
And then, Trishka, do you care if we just make another amendment, or should somebody make the motion to reintroduce with all of those amendments that have been made?
I think as long as it's clear in the record that you wanted those 2 housekeeping changes made before you introduced it, and so
That's fine, okay. So is there a motion to amend the ordinance as described by Ms. Stockton?
I'll move it.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved by Mr. Cohen and seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you for those catches. And I just want to open it up. Is there anybody from the public who'd like to speak to this ordinance before council votes on it? Come on up.
Tina Cotillo, 79 Dempsey Avenue. If I understand right, the maximum parking rate is going to be $2.25 per hour? Yes? On the street?
Yes, in the central business district,
Right.
correct.
Thank you. I would like to thank you for all the hard work, and I would like to respectfully urge you to make street parking more expensive than garage parking. I've been here before saying the same thing, and the reason is that unless street parking becomes more expensive than garage parking, people will try to feed the meter because it's cheaper. And so the only way to get people off the street and get turnover is to make it less attractive for them to be there for a long amount of time. I would also urge you to make it expensive. I know there's going to be an outcry about it, but let's be honest. If you don't get outcry, you are not bold enough. So what I'd like to suggest is to have a rack rate on our streets. Hotels do this too. The commercial garage at Halfish Street does this. They have a rack rate, it's pretty high. But then they have breaks for people who live there, people who go to the churches nearby. And I would like to propose that we do the same thing on our streets, where we give breaks to people with handicap parking stickers. They should be able to park for free, and I think they do. I think we should extend that courtesy to anybody who's over the age of 80, because they deserve it. Maybe families with small children. But you know what? I am thankful to be able-bodied. I can walk or bike to town. And I think you should sock me with a decent parking rate so that I don't come to town in my car. In New York, the parking rate is $4.50 for the first hour and $7.50 for the second hour. We are not New York, but neither are we Elizabeth, and I think I saw Ms. Dixon flash up this number that was $2 per hour in Elizabeth. I think we can go a bit higher than that.
Thank you. And just to clarify, the parking rate on the street is cheaper, is more expensive than the rate in the public garage. We don't have control over what Palmer Square charges. So the most expensive place to park is in the Palmer Square garages, the Wholefish garage and the Chambers Street garage. So we encourage you to try public parking first, and the money goes to a very good cause when you park in the public spaces. But thank you for your comments. And as part of this, one of the benefits of the new meters is that it will be easier for us to track usage. And I think the idea is we're going to be revisiting the rates every year, unlike how we've treated them in the past. And we want to make sure that we set the rates so that they're creating the kind of parking behavior that benefits the local businesses and benefits traffic flow in the town. So we appreciate your comments. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak before we vote?
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. My normal activity on a Friday takes 2.5 hours. And we're going to have to watch the watch and leave our restaurant earlier than we normally do. So I just suggest that you monitor that with the merchants to see whether that's working really well. Because, as I said, we start about 5 o'clock, we end at 7:30 or so, and every Friday. And we, there are a bunch of us, we spend quite a bit of money on food. And you're slightly, curtailing our style. So just want to make you aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. So we encourage, look at where the 3-hour parking is. Maybe that would work, or the garage. That's the intention. But I think we'll take a look at that. And again, I think the new meters will help us track how many people are maxing out with the 2 hours. And we can maybe make adjustments too, depending on that. All right. Are we ready to vote? Okay.
Ready?
Are you ready? Yes. Please call the roll.
Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Ms. Howard?
Yes.
Ms. Crom-Miller?
No.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Ms. Fraga?
Yes.
And sorry, Councilman Liverman just came in.
Okay, and the public hearing for this ordinance will be on October 22nd, 2018. And now, at the very beginning of the meeting, if anybody came in late, we amended the agenda, so we're going to move up the Princeton Theological Seminary resolution, and then we'll come back to the ordinance introduction over neighborhood character second. So I'd like to invite up Jim Constantine, and I'm going to read the resolution, which is 18336, resolution determining that certain properties owned by the Princeton Theological Seminary and located on Stockton Street, Library Place, Edge Hill Street, and Hibben Road Block 3501, lots 25, 26, and 29, Block 3601, lots 15, 16, 17, and 20, and Block 3602, lots 5, 6, and 7 shall be a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment. And I also wanted to clarify that when this issue has come up in the past, I've recused myself, as has Ms. Howard, out of a preponderance of caution, but we, our attorneys have had a chance to look more closely into whether it's actually a conflict or not, and have decided it's not a conflict. So we are here tonight for this discussion.
Trishka, can you just confirm that verbally so people know that we've been through this process?
I can confirm that you've consulted with both me and Mr. Van Heijs, and we agree there's no conflict of interest that requires your recusal at this time.
Okay, thank you.
You know, do you want to explain it?
Yeah,
'Cause
let
I
me
think
explain.
It is kind of
So
mysterious.
it was somewhat convoluted, but essentially one of the advantages of a redevelopment tool is it provides for a community benefit, which can take multiple forms, but one of those forms can be payment towards affordable housing. Ms. Howard and I are recusing from the council's current affordable housing discussions in developing the plan because Princeton University properties make up a large portion of that affordable housing plan, and because I'm married, my husband is a professor at the university, and because Ms. Howard works at the university, we were advised that that could pose a potential conflict. But now we're told that we don't have to worry about it, which is good because it was complicated to explain to people.
Exactly. It's all a bit too speculative at this point, especially given what you're voting on this evening. So.
All right, thank you. I want to turn it over to Mr. Constantine to sort of walk us through what the question is in front of us and your recommendation.
Sure, thank you. Good evening. I'm going to provide a quick introduction, talk about the advantages of a redevelopment plan, which sort of jumps ahead to the next step, but I think it's a question that's always in everyone's mind. Then talk about the scope for this investigation, talk about the master plan, which has an important role, the criteria under the statute, then go through each of the 10 properties very quickly, and a conclusion. So, for starters, the Princeton's 2017 master plan reexamination states that the Princeton Seminary has indicated it is evaluating options for its tenant campus on Stockton Street, and the community will need to provide input into how and if this site should be redeveloped. So this preliminary investigation is the municipality's first step in a planning process to further explore the potential for redevelopment options as identified in the master plan. It should be noted that this study does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation for any specific plan or strategy involving the Princeton Theological Seminary campus and its expansion. If the Municipal Council concludes that the portions of the campus identified in the study constitute an area in need of redevelopment, any subsequent redevelopment plan or strategy, including identifying portions of the campus to be preserved, to be redeveloped, remains in the purview of the Council to evaluate, commencing with the next step, directing the preparation of a redevelopment plan, as called for in the community's master plan. So it's really about additional special planning tools that can come into play for the municipality. And the first question that always comes up is we're dealing with this thing called the redevelopment plan. Unfortunately, in New Jersey, we have to use that statute. It's the only one available for these special planning tools that really take us into a place between the high-level policies of a master plan and the sort of granular formulas of zoning. But in between, there's room for what in many other states is called a specific area plan or a small area plan or a sub-area plan. It's also, you can find examples of that in Canada and Australia, besides many places in the US, which really tries to take you from that high-level master plan down to something that gives you a specific plan for an area at the district, neighborhood, or corridor level provides all sorts of additional tools. In some cases, in other states, these are initiated by neighborhood groups, by the municipality, by major property owners, by combinations of them all. There's usually a very robust process. More exact zoning and guidelines, often economic development tools are coupled with it. In New Jersey, what we have available is really a statute that's been a bit reworked that dates all the way back to days of urban renewal. So it's sitting with this charged title called a redevelopment plan. So redevelopment plans have been used here in Princeton before for the Spring Street Garage, Heinz Plaza, and the mixed-use buildings here. It's been used over in Plainsboro for the Princeton Healthcare Campus, on the former FMC campus on Route 1. It's been used in the Transit Village at Princeton Junction in West Windsor. It's been used in Ewing, in Hopewell Borough, Hopewell Township, Montgomery, Cranberry, Robbinsville, East Windsor, Heightstown, South Brunswick, Franklin, Hillsborough, Hamilton, to name just a few of the closest municipalities. In some cases, they only went through the investigation, which we have before us. Some of them adopted redevelopment plans. Some have gone through and seen redevelopment implemented. Some haven't. So it's an additional tool. I should also indicate that adopting this does not take away the existing zoning. At this stage, the redevelopment plan would replace it or affect historic district of status and regulations. So what are the advantages?
Can I just interrupt you
Sure.
for 1 second? Because I feel like I should have introduced you more fully when I asked you to come up. So Jim is acting as our planner during this period when we are without a staff person planner. So when Lee Solo retired, we retained Jim's firm to provide planning services for the town. So he's here in that capacity. Because you're also a Princeton resident, so people might have seen you with other hats on. So I just want to make sure everybody knows what you're doing here. So
Okay,
continue.
Thank you. Sure. So quickly, stepping ahead to the next step, if you were to adopt this and we were to move forward with a redevelopment plan, what are some of the advantages that this provides, the benefits? One, it gives you greater control than conventional zoning. It's not just limited to structures. You can also specifically designate structures to be preserved, which you can't do with just normal historic district designation, and you can't do under zoning. But you can do this to perpetuity, and you can do the same thing with regards to public space, park, landscape features, open space of any kind. In fact, downtown we have Heinz Plaza, which was a public space required in a redevelopment plan. Across Route 1 at the Princeton Healthcare Campus, Plainsboro required a park along the Millstone River. And planned in the Princeton Junction Transit Village is the Promenade, a major public space that will sort of redefine the center of West Windsor. So public space can be part of this. You're able to do more proactive public participation, and I know the council talked about that in June. If you reach that next step, than you can when you deal with normal zoning, where you're trying to come up with some formulas that might, where things might be developed. In this case, you can actually create a plan. You can create a very specific plan. You can include non-contiguous properties. It's one of the other creative aspects of the tool. Can be a site-specific conceptual plan contained in the redevelopment plan. You have greater control over design. You can require that preservation components as well as built improvements be phased and constructed exactly as contained within the plan. You have a public-private partnering process that can also help create better end results. One of the tools and controls a municipality gets is the ability to designate a qualified redeveloper, and you have obligations that you can put forth in a redevelopment agreement, which, again, you don't have these things in normal zoning. Somebody can get an approval from the planning board, a site plan approval, and then go out and market or flip, as we say, and sell that approval. You cannot do that with a redevelopment plan. You have control. You get to designate who's going to be the redeveloper. So you have the ability to protect community interests to a much greater degree, and you also have the ability to put into play some technical financial assistance at the option of the municipality. Everything is at the option of the municipality. So let's quickly talk about the scope of this study. It's to conduct an inventory and catalog existing conditions, analyze the potential build-out under existing zoning which affects some of these properties, you'll hear, talk about how they relate to the surrounding historic residential neighborhood, an important issue in the master plan, talk about the extent existing conditions meet the statutory criteria, which I'll go into shortly, and indicate the findings and proposed recommendations. Whoops. So the 10 properties that are contained in this are shown in the map up above and labeled 1 through 10. They extend from Mercer Street to Stockton, both ends of Hibben Road, Edge Hill Street, and Library Place. There they are in an aerial photo. I'll have this again as we go through each of the properties. The existing zoning consists of E4, so educational zoning on all but 2 of the properties. Properties 1 and 7 are contained in the R1 residence district. In terms of historic preservation, and by the way, this is, it's interesting to note how the zoning lines and the preservation lines don't overlay cleanly here. Half of the properties are within the Mercer Hill Historic District, half of them are out. It's a type 2 district. There is no buffer. If it was a historic district with a buffer, you might have some of the other properties brought in. We'll talk about that as we go through some of the potential related to the master plan. So, and that's really what we turn to, and it's most important in any redevelopment plan that it have consistency and really help effectuate the master plan. And so in looking at the master plan, the statement I read earlier, Seminary has talked about redeveloping the Stockton Street tenant campus site, which includes the Whiteley Gym as well as Roberts Hall. And so I've identified that in the master plan, or I should say the planning board, because it's their document, as a policy that we need to engage the community, decide how and if this site should be redeveloped. Other goals of the master plan are to preserve the scenic quality of Princeton's principal gateways and to take steps to enhance and protect those gateways. We have 2 gateways that are impacted here. Stockton Street, where the tenant campus sits, and then down on Mercer Street, where we brought the ball field at the corner of Hibben into this area for consideration. Encouraging historic preservation through land use policies that support the preservation of historic buildings and sites. We have this issue where the Historic Preservation District sort of runs through half the properties, but the other half are out. And then preserving and protecting the character of existing established neighborhoods. Institutional educational, thank you, somebody fixed that, I appreciate that. The functional and growth requirements of institutions must be balanced with the residential character of the community. It's sort of a big, important principle in the master plan. Addressing impacts to the community on traffic, transportation, housing, development, environmental concerns, where we have educational or institutional growth, and then finding, this is important, appropriate transition between established neighborhoods and educational and institutional uses. This has been a concern with some of the surrounding neighborhoods in the past for a whole variety of impacts and reasons, and this is a place where you might be challenged to find other places in town that have such close proximity and cheek-to-jowl relationship between the surrounding neighborhood and parts of the campus or properties owned by the institution. Other master plan principles, trying to strike a balance between the institution's needs for new facilities and the impacts on the neighborhood as well as all of Princeton. Zoning regulations that can take into account the impact of the scale, bulk, mass of educational and institutional buildings so that they don't overwhelm neighborhoods. And that's really the big challenge. Institutions are building for different functions at a completely different scale and size than often the adjoining single-family homes. And then, attempting to address expansion into proposed neighborhoods so that it's in a manner that benefits both the community and the institution. And lastly, on the institutional uses, encouraging them to protect and preserve the architectural and landscape heritage, the design qualities of the buildings, even when not specifically designated within established historic preservation districts. And an update of the long-range plan of all the institutions, including the seminary, should be regarding how long-term development in and around their campuses should be completed prior to any major new expansion. So the master plan is saying we should be looking at these institutional campus plans and trying to address those before we're seeing applications to try to assure that there's compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods. And then lastly, on gateway features, I mentioned we have 2 gateways that are impacted here. The master plan speaks a lot about the importance of gateways as part of the arrival into the community, especially where they're characterized by distinctive residential development and historically significant structures and places. You have that both on Mercer Street and on Stockton. These 2 would also fit the master plan provision that they have exceptional visual and historic significance to merit preservation and preserving both the residential character and the historic significance of these entrances. So on to the statutory criteria. And this is where it sounds a little bit technical, but I have only put up here 4 of the criteria. There's others, and remember, these sort of relate back to the pretty old statutes that were related to urban renewal. So the first one is that the generality of the buildings are substandard, unsafe, unsanitary, dilapidated, or obsolescent, or possess any of such characteristics, or are so lacking in light, air, or space as to be conducive to unwholesome living or working conditions. And really the key terms there are obsolescent, and really thinking about obsolescence as a continuum of moving towards being in an obsolescent state. You don't have to be obsolete. You can be anywhere along that line. And also relating to, there are some issues relating to safety that we've identified as well, and some of that has an impact on some of the living and working conditions on the specific properties. Criteria D are areas with buildings or improvements which by reason of dilapidation, obsolescence, there's that term again, overcrowding, faulty arrangement or design. We have several things we're going to cite on faulty arrangement or design, and then lack of ventilation, light, and sanitary facilities, excessive land coverage, deleterious land use, or obsolete layout, there's that again, or any combination of these factors are detrimental to the safety, health, morals, or welfare of the community, which really are the police powers that enable zoning and allow planning by a municipality. Criteria H is the designation of the delineated areas consistent with smart growth planning principles adopted pursuant to law or regulations. We'll talk about the state plan, and that also does relate a bit back to the master plan, but more the New Jersey State Development and Redevelopment Plan. And then there's Section 3 criteria. Section 3 criteria is a provision that states that a redevelopment area may include lands, buildings, or improvements which of themselves are not detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, but the inclusion of which is found necessary with or without change in their condition for the effective development of the area of which they are a part. And so that comes up on some of the properties as well. I should also mention that the criteria H for smart growth has to be paired with another criteria. It can't stand on its own. So let's go into the properties themselves and start with the private recreation field at 4 Hibben Road. This is a minimally improved property at the corner of Mercer and Hibben. It's located in the R1 zoning district. It's not within the Mercer Hill Historic District, but it sits across the street from it. It's a little over 2 acres of land. It's used as a private recreation field for seminary students. In the past, they utilized the field for more formal sports such as soccer. That's why there's a tall chain link fence, 12-foot high chain link fence at the edge. But the field has gradually declined over the years and is presently utilized for just casual sports activities like frisbee and flag football. And the students have taken those more formal recreation activities to more accommodating fields. So there's an obsolescence that's been occurring in terms of the use of this as the decline of activity for formal recreation. So the existing use has been becoming more and more obsolete. The existing zoning of the property may also contribute to its further obsolescence and likely redevelopment. Mentioned it's zoned R1. The property could be subdivided and redeveloped as of right with 4 conforming single-family homes. And if you just split it up into 4 equal lots, those would be, homes that could equal 5,000 square feet in area each, which is about twice the size of many of the homes across the street, so there'd be a real scale change. Additionally, the field is bounded by an approximate 12-foot high chain link fence. It's been there for at least 30 years, doesn't conform to the present ordinance. It's detrimental to preserving the exceptional visual and residential character of this Mercer Street Gateway as identified in the master plan. The 12-foot high chain link fence is an incompatible streetscape treatment in relation to really the lush landscape character of adjacent Marquand Park, Mercer Street, Hibben Road, and the front yards of the whole surrounding residential neighborhood. So that represents a faulty arrangement and design in terms of the edge of it. The property is also among half of the properties in the study area that are located adjacent to but not within the Mercer Hill Historic District, and it is, as I mentioned before, within this important gateway as identified in the master plan. So our summary of findings indicate that due to a combination of the field's obsolescence and incompatible streetscape treatment, the faulty design and arrangement with the fence, the private recreation field is detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the community in accordance with criteria D. Furthermore, the designation as an area in need of redevelopment could enable the municipality to establish a redevelopment plan with special gateway zoning and historic district buffer provisions not present under current zoning, or historic district regulations that could protect the welfare of the community. And then last, the property can also qualify as an area in need of redevelopment under the Section 3 criteria that I discussed previously. The next property is 3436 Hibben Road, Whiteley Gymnasium. It's at the corner of Stockton and Hibben. It's located in the E4 zoning district. It's not within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's about 0.87 acres of land. The gymnasium was constructed in 1929. It has a fitness center, a gymnasium and a fitness center on the ground floor, several playing courts, locker rooms, and other classrooms located on the lower level. And attached to the building at each end are 2 apartments, one at each end of the building. Most of the structure lacks most of the features of a modern gymnasium and fitness facility, particularly one that's associated with an institution of higher learning. So there's not a handicapped accessible entrance with direct routing from the street. You can come up, slide around up on Stockton Street, go by the windows of one of the apartments and go in sort of a side door for handicapped accessibility. There is the fitness room is handicapped accessible by way of a lift to that lower level. However, the building lacks an elevator. At the lower level, the locker rooms and other meeting space under the gymnasium have no handicapped accessibility at all. There are several handball courts that have been rendered inaccessible for more than 20 years due to the existing doorway that's severely undersized, 19 inches in width, less than 6 feet in height. There are handball courts behind other handball courts that you have to snake through to get to. It's an incredibly obsolete layout to access them, so they have just been inaccessible and unused. The entire building lacks a central AC system. There are numerous rooms in the interior with no or minimal natural ventilation. The fitness room, for instance, has a narrow portion in the back with no windows. There are 2 other windows up in the front of the fitness room that have security grills because they're left open with fans trying to get adequate air. The apartments have no handicapped accessibility. They share a common entry vestibule with the gymnasium, and they also suffer from poor sound attenuation due to the placement of apartment living space against a common interior wall with the gymnasium. Oh, and lastly, there's no accommodation for seating or spectators in the main gymnasium space. The property is not within the Mercer Hill Historic District, but it is within the gateway identified in the master plan. And our summary of findings is due to a combination of faulty arrangement and design, lack of ventilation and obsolescence of the gymnasium, as well as the faulty arrangement and design, location, and configuration of the apartments attached to a gymnasium. They are detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the inhabitants of the apartments and the community in accordance with criterion D. And the substandard and obsolescent characteristics of the apartments are conducive to unwholesome living conditions in accordance with criteria A. And this designation as an area in need of redevelopment, again, one of the benefits would enable the municipality to establish a redevelopment plan with special gateway zoning and historic district buffer provisions that are not present under the existing zoning or historic preservation that would protect the welfare of the community. The next property is Tenant Hall, which sits across Hibben Road and facing Stockton Street, 108 Stockton. It's in the E4 zoning district. It is not within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's just under 3 acres of land. It contains Tenant Hall facing Stockton Street, and there are 3 detached residences behind it. There's a surface parking lot, a playground. There's a large open yard at the front of Tenant Hall, sort of the quadrangle, I'll use that term, that faces Stockton Street, as well as a large yard to the rear. Part of that includes a swale along the southern property line to assist with managing stormwater runoff. And that's traversed by an electric line with poles and a transformer that services the property. It was originally constructed in 1829 as the Edge Hill School for Boys, later a private residence. It burned down. It was rebuilt as the Hun Preparatory School from 1920 to 1943 and acquired by the Princeton Theological Seminary after that. It's a building 3 stories in height, offices and classrooms on the ground floor, 13 apartments on the 2nd and 3rd floor. Tenant Hall does not have fire separation construction in the attic. Also, the only way to access the attic is through a pull-down ladder that's located within one of the apartments. We did go in and inspect and go up and look at that. Only the 1st floor of the building is serviced by a central AC system. The 2nd and 3rd floors have to use window units, including all the apartments. There's a large exterior condenser surrounded by hedges that sits out in the quadrangle facing Stockton Street. The heating system is obsolete, given that parts for it are no longer manufactured by the foundry which produced it. I believe they've purchased some of the remaining available parts, but you basically, when it goes, it'll need to be replaced. It provides spaceport heat not only to Tenant Hall, but also to the next property we'll talk about, Roberts Hall, the property just to the east. The building and site have an underground stormwater system that has failed. It's no longer operational. There are downspouts from Tenant Hall that are being rerouted overland by PVC pipe to get it further away from the building, just to discharge it. However, the site has very poor drainage. The parking areas lack catch basins and inlets. The courtyard area, paved courtyard area, which you see pictured in the lower left at the rear of the building, there you can see it retaining water. And there's also sandbags that are placed on the base of some of the doors to prevent stormwater migration back into the building, which floods the offices on the lower levels. The swale along the southern edge of the property that I mentioned earlier was installed to help address some of the site drainage issues and try to benefit some of the joining resident, in particular on Hibben Road. However, another condition that's out there is if the swale is retaining water or extremely wet from recent runoff retainage, then this condition could prevent emergency services of the pole-mounted transformer, which is the transformer for the property, so you can't get to it in the event that that swale is wet. There's evidence of water damage near various windows, portions of the concrete masonry unit block, foundation in the basement. On the 3rd floor, dormers lack insulation, pipes occasionally freeze. The base of the masonry wall in the main mechanical room is eroding. To complete the property, the 3 detached residences appear to be generally in good condition, and we didn't make any attempt to access the interiors of those. So our findings are due to a combination of faulty arrangement and design, lack of ventilation and obsolescence, Tenant Hall is detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the community in accordance with criterion D. Substandard, unsafe, and obsolescent characteristics of the ground floor offices and third floor apartments are conducive to unwholesome working and living conditions in accordance with criteria A. And again, to speak to the benefits, the designation as an area in need of redevelopment would enable the municipality to establish special gateway zoning and historic district buffer provisions not present under existing zoning or historic preservation, thus protecting the public welfare. The next property is 100 Stockton Street, Roberts Hall. So that sits the remaining bookend opposite Whiteley Gym at the other end of this quadrangle facing Stockton Street. It's adjacent to, but again, not within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's just over half an acre of land. It contains Roberts Hall, originally constructed in 1920 as a dormitory for the Hun School, acquired by the Theological Seminary in 1943. It's a 3-story building, 28 apartments in 3 separate sections. Each have their own entrance and basement. The basement contains tenant storage spaces, laundry facilities, a meeting room. The building is not handicapped accessible. The 3 separate sections of the building are not interconnected. There's no common corridor. So a resident who wishes to visit another section of the building or go use the laundry room down in the basement, which is in the next section, has to go outside to access that. Same thing with the common lounge and the storage rooms, or just visiting another resident. Several fire escapes are attached to the rear of the building, and only one of the 3 sections has a basement with 2 means of egress, and one of those means of egress, which you see pictured in the lower right photo here, you have to actually climb up a step ladder to access it, so has a code constraint there. The underground stormwater system, I should add one other point. The steps that lead to the basement have treads that measure only 18 feet in width. They have a flat concrete surface to the side that I think is meant to accommodate moving furniture and other large things down, things related to the kitchen that I think was in there at one time. The underground stormwater system, like the adjacent tenant hall, has failed, forcing downspouts to be rerouted overland in PVC pipe. The drainage grates at the bottom of the exterior stairs, like you see pictured in the lower left, have failed and routinely flood. There's water migration into the basement. There's water damage to the concrete block enclosing the stairwell, and many of the basement windows leak and are now covered up with temporary wooden structures over them, which you can see pictured in the middle photograph. There's something heavy kind of holding the wood in place on those so that you don't have further migration back in. The building lacks central AC. 28 apartments rely on window AC units. There's no independent heating system. The heat is provided by way of a pump inside adjacent tenant hall, so the same challenges and obsolescence of the existing heating system at tenant hall also apply here. And it is adjacent to, but not within the Mercer Hill Historic District, but it is within one of these primary community gateways as identified in the master plan. So a summary of our findings are that due to a combination of faulty arrangement and design, lack of ventilation and obsolescence, Roberts Hall is detrimental to the health, safety, and welfare of the community in accordance with criterion D. The substandard, unsafe, and obsolescent characteristics of the basement spaces and apartments are conducive to unwholesome living conditions in accordance with criteria A. And again, a potential benefit is that designation as an area in need of redevelopment would enable the municipality to establish special gateway zoning and historic district buffer provisions not present under existing zoning or historic preservation regulations, thus protecting the public welfare. Next, we have 92 Stockton Street, which is a single-family dwelling which is adjacent to Roberts Hall. This is at the corner of Stockton and Edge Hill. It's in the E4 district, in the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's just under half an acre of land. It's a 2.5-story dwelling. We did not go inside the structure. And here is where this one falls into the criteria. Given that the lot size and the maximum permitted floor area ratio, 0.6 in the E4 zoning district, A structure of over 12,000 square feet of floor area is permitted as of right under the existing zoning. Remember that flag that was in the master plan? The existing structure that's there is about 4,000 square feet. So you could triple the floor area as of right under the existing zoning. And so that maximum build-out that's permitted contributes to the obsolescence of the existing use. Due to the significant unrealized development potential as of right under the existing zoning, whether in the form of new construction, significant expansion, or just complete redevelopment, which require a request for demolition in the historic district, could result in scale, bulk, mass, traffic, environmental, and other impacts that are detrimental to the welfare of the community, as identified in the master plan. The master plan also raised concerns about the impacts of the e-zoning on established neighborhoods by stating consideration needs to be given to applying zoning standards or developing transitional zones that provide for a smooth and orderly transition between the institutional campus and other uses in the community. So our findings here are that the build-out potential permitted as of right under existing zoning contributes to the obsolescence of the existing use, which is detrimental to the welfare of the community in accordance with criteria D. Designation as an area in need of redevelopment would enable the municipality to establish transitional zoning and require preservation of the existing structure. It's not a determination right now. We're just suggesting you could actually do that and require it, given that you can triple the floor area on the site. And then furthermore, the property can also qualify as an area under the Section 3 criteria that I mentioned earlier, and qualification under that criteria would allow opportunities for a future redevelopment plan to again require preservation of that existing structure. The next property is 35 Edge Hill Street, also a single-family dwelling across the street from the prior one. It's on the east side of Edge Hill. It's in the R1 zoning district, and it is within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's a small tract, about 1/5 of an acre, contains a 2.5-story dwelling. We did not try to gain access to the interior of this single-family home. Our finding is that this property qualifies as an area in need of redevelopment under the Section 3 criteria, which states that a redevelopment may include lands, buildings, or improvements which of themselves are not detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, but the inclusion of which is found necessary with or without change in their condition for the effective development of the area of which they are a part. So again, qualification under this criteria would allow opportunities for a future redevelopment plan to require preservation of this property. So it's abutting the Urban Hall properties, which is why we included it. 26 Library Place, the west side of Library Place. So this backs up to the property I just referred to. Again, it's on the seam, the transition seam that was talked about in the master plan. It's in the E4 district. It's within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's just over 1/3 of an acre, contains a 2.5-story single-family dwelling. We did not attempt to gain access to the interior. Given the lot size and the maximum permitted floor area ratio of 0.6 in the E4 zone, and the size of the existing structure is 5,400 square feet, but more than 9,600 square feet is permitted as of right under the existing zoning. So almost doubling the amount that's there. Maximum build-out under the existing zoning allows for much greater floor area than presently exists, which contributes to the obsolescence of its existing use. And this significant unrealized development potential as of right under the existing zoning, whether it's new construction, significant expansion, or redevelopment, could in the future result in scale, bulk, mass, traffic, environmental, other impacts detrimental to the welfare of the community as identified in the master plan. So our, and again, the master plan, as I mentioned previously, indicates that consideration needs to be given to applying zoning standards for developing transitional zones for a smooth and orderly transition between the institutional campus and other uses. So our findings here were that the build-out potential permitted as of right under existing zoning contributes to the obsolescence of the existing use, which is detrimental to the welfare of the community in accordance with criterion D. Further potential benefit of designation is that it would enable the municipality to establish special transitional zoning and require preservation of the existing structure. And then lastly, the Section 3 criteria would also apply here. The next property, we're getting towards the end, is 20 Library Place, the Urban Center. This is on a... Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry if I fell off. I apologize. Okay, there we go. This is a through lot. Fronts on the west side of Library Place and the east side of Edge Hill. It's in the E4 zoning district. It's within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's about 1.5 acres. There's an existing 3-story structure with a south wing, a north wing, and there's a 1-story addition further to the north, together with a parking area and drop-off zone that's visible from Library Place. And there's a large open space at the rear of the building along Edge Hill. The south wing, originally constructed as a dormitory in 1968, renovated in 97, and converted to guest housing units on the 2nd and 3rd floor. These accommodate short-term stays for those visiting students and scholars. And the north wing was originally constructed in 71 as a dormitory and also renovated in 97 when it was converted to additional guest housing and meeting rooms. And the ground floor consists of lobby space and meeting rooms. And the 1-story addition further to the north, constructed in 1999, consists of additional meeting rooms as well as video conference rooms. Within the north wing, the original portion of Erdman Hall, or the oldest portion, I should say, the original plumbing was installed in the cavity of the concrete masonry unit walls. Creates a great difficulty in providing access for maintenance, replacement, because it was buried within concrete walls or enclosed. And the juncture of the floor levels between the north and south wings don't meet at the same levels. So there's a whole series of these little half-story transition spaces and stairs and elevator stops in the lobby space. So there's inefficient circulation between the two wings, and there's also wasted space. And basically there's open storage occurring in some of this wasted space with cabinets and other materials. A majority of the guest housing units in the north wing are small and arranged in pairs, sharing a single, what you might refer to as a Jack and Jill bathroom with an extremely narrow, non-handicapped accessible doorway. Given the shared access, guests are sometimes locked out of the bathroom to their room by the resident that's sharing the bathroom from the adjoining room. In fact, in the photo in the lower right, you can see there's a little sign to remind people not to do that. The 1-story addition on this building was also designed to have a separate entrance and larger meeting room, direct access from Library Place. To maintain a single point of entry and security, the newer secondary entrance is locked, and so there's sort of an obsolete condition with circulation. You have to go all the way down to the south wing to get in. And then lastly, the parking lot is situated along the side of the property with Adams House, and there's one parking space at the top of the stairway. There's just you can see it pictured in the center picture there. There's just a wheel stop. It's makes for very difficult circulation having parking spaces sitting at the top of a stair, really unprotected for the pedestrian. So summary here is that due to a combination of faulty arrangement and design and obsolescence, Erdman Hall is detrimental to the health and welfare of the community in accordance with criteria D, and the substandard and obsolescent characteristics of the majority of the north wing guest housing units are conducive to unwholesome living conditions in accordance with criterion A. 12 Library Place is Adams House. I think this is our last property. It's a through lot fronting on the west side of Library Place, goes through to the east side of Edge Hill. It's located in the E4 zone. It's within the Mercer Hill Historic District. It's about 2/3 of an acre. Contains a 2-story structure along Library Place, a 1-story, which we did not inspect, a 1-story addition to the south, which we did go into, together with a garden at the rear of the building, and then there's a driveway leading to a detached 3-car garage that fronts on Edge Hill Street. Originally constructed in 1915 as a resident, it's been converted to offices and additional meeting space. For the Urban Center on the first floor, there's 10 housing units above, on the second floor, and then there's this 1-story addition at the rear of the original structure that contains additional offices and meeting rooms, which we did go into. That addition is several steps lower than the main floor, but it's not handicapped accessible. Additionally, the office space at the rear is only accessible by traversing through another office space as well as through a meeting room to get to it. And then the rear of the property along Edge Hill includes the boxy, flat roof, stucco 3-car garage, which is really an intrusion upon the rich historic character of Edge Hill as a residential street. Otherwise, there's homes, well landscaped front yards. Parking is basically at the back of the lots. Here you have a parking and a driveway and a garage right at the front. So our summary here was due to a combination of faulty arrangement and design and obsolescence. The rear one-story addition on Adams House and the detached garage are detrimental to the health and welfare of the community in accordance with criterion D. So that takes us through the 10 properties. And I think just to pick up some speed here on the back end, I mentioned before that there's criteria H, which has to deal with smart growth. And all of the properties located within the study area can also be designated as an area in need of redevelopment in accordance with criteria H, based on the fact that the study area is consistent with smart growth and the policy objectives for the state development and redevelopment plans, suburban planning area, PA2, and the intent of center-based development. Princeton was designated a regional center in 1995 under the state plan. And so we're consistent with the smart growth policies of the state plan. And I'm going to skip through the details on smart growth and those policy objectives and bring us to a conclusion, which is this analysis shows that the designation is appropriate due to the existence of significant challenges, mainly related to obsolescence and faulty arrangement. Overcoming these hindrances while taking advantage of opportunities for preservation as well as redevelopment would allow these properties to become potentially useful and valuable and better contributing to serving the public health, safety, and welfare of the surrounding area and the community in general. And more specifically, the analysis shows that the vacant property used as a private recreation field and 2 of the single-family homes feature a combination of incompatible streetscape treatment, obsolescence, or they have build-out potential under the present zoning that contributes to their obsolescence, all of which are detrimental to the health, safety, or welfare of the community. And other buildings such as the gymnasium, tennis hall, Roberts Hall, the urban center, and a portion of well as the detached garage associated with Adams House all have aspects of faulty arrangement and design, lack of ventilation, obsolescence, and are detrimental to the health, safety, welfare of the community, and in some cases are substandard, unsafe, obsolete, or otherwise conducive to unwholesome working or living conditions. So collectively, I think one other point is worth noting, which is the disconnection of the properties with respect to the tenant campus from the Princeton Theological Seminary as a whole is really reflective of the fact that the seminary's campus has grown in sort of a piecemeal evolution and expansion north of Mercer Street. So the designation of these properties as an area in need of redevelopment would address not only the issues within each property, but also would be fundamental to the layout of the campus and would be consistent and contribute to smart growth planning as well as the state plan, the Princeton master plan, and would be a better alternative than the existing zoning and maintaining the status quo. I think, as I mentioned earlier, this designation does not take away the existing zoning. That would only take place by way of a redevelopment plan where you might explore better alternatives. It does not supersede the existing historic district in making this designation. And lastly, adopting this does not bind the council to adopting a redevelopment plan that would change the existing zoning or any of the other ordinances affecting these properties. Just gives you that option to explore it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that thorough report. I actually still have a few questions, and so I think we'll start with if there's any questions from council, and then we'll open it up to any public comment. So I guess my first question, and maybe this is more directed towards Tim and David, I know Planning Board reviewed this, and can we just get the report on what Planning Board said?
Sure. The planning board passed a resolution recommending to council that this area, the study area, be designated as an area in need of redevelopment. It was a very brief, short and sweet resolution.
Okay, thank you. And then I know there's a lot of ifs that you just said about what it would mean if council voted yes for this, but could you just lay out what the process would be and what like a calendar might even be for if we vote yes on this, then what happens and how does it work?
Well, the next step is you could ask the planning board to, you can take this on, or you can ask the planning board. In most cases, it tends to go to the planning board, and they work with the planner and begin a process of, I think in this case, because of the desire for robust community engagement and the fact that you have some of these gateways that I think there's 30,000 people that probably have some opinions about some of the property here, really explore laying out what the appropriate planning process would be, including public engagement, the stakeholders that might be involved in this process as well. And I think really trying to map that out, and which could be, again, something that's handled by the subcommittee of the planning board, or they may designate a steering committee, because you may be involving representatives from historic preservation or even the historic district, the seminary. You know, that's really something I think for the planning board to consider and then determine and moving that forward. So that could occur immediately, and then that once we have a scope for what that might be, something's going to come back to council, obviously, to authorize that, and then that process could begin. So it could begin fairly shortly.
And is a redevelopment plan, does it read like zoning, or is it read more like a site plan, or what does it look like, and what, or is it a little bit of both?
It would read more like a plan. I think Trishka wants to speak
Yeah,
to this.
it's almost like a hybrid. You know, and they vary. There's no hard and fast rule, but a lot of the ones that I've seen, if you've ever seen a general development plan, they can look similar to that. But for instance, just to give you an example, the one in Plainsboro for the healthcare campus, it's a book. It's about that thick, because a redevelopment plan has to contain sections that talk about its relationship to the master plan. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, but then a good portion of that is literally how that area is to develop, and it gets very prescriptive. There are actually concept plans in there, there are illustrations. It gets right down to the nitty-gritty of what should, you know, what percentage of a facade should be glass or fenestration, you know, facade articulation. So it also has sections that contain all the bulk requirements, what the uses are, because that area is actually divided into sub-districts, but it lists out the uses. So it's like a zoning ordinance, concept plan, and a bunch of other stuff all rolled into one document. Now, I know there are communities where their redevelopment plans are much more general, and so it really, you know, a lot of it depends on what you need and what you want, but you have a lot of flexibility, and as Jim said, you can be very prescriptive and very specific in what you put in that plan in terms of articulating not only what you're allowing, but what your vision is. And I think that's one of the things that sets it apart from conventional zoning.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Krummeller?
Oh, yeah, as a follow-up, is that, so is it not, it's not an ordinance adopted by the council?
It is in the sense that you adopt the redevelopment plan by ordinance.
So the
Now,
council ultimately,
only the council can adopt
Okay.
it. So it comes back, either the council prepares it, or it delegates, it tasks the planning board with preparing it. Either way, it comes back to the council, because only the council can adopt it, and that requires an ordinance.
Okay.
Now, some of my towns that have done this, the plan itself is the ordinance. In another town, there's the whole plan, and then the plan contained a lengthy set of standards to be codified separately in the code, but you don't have to do it that way. The plan itself can be sort of the whole thing.
'Cause
But it's
I-
done by ordinance.
Because since it's going to come back to the council, I would suggest we have council representation on whatever committee is working on it.
So just to, first of all, my second time through this presentation, and it doesn't get old. I was wondering, in the beginning, you talked about the advantages. One of the advantages would be that we could identify a developer. So would that be working with the seminary to identify a developer? And would we have sort of right of first refusal if they pick someone who we didn't? So our only experience that you mentioned is a municipal project, which was the library, Heinz Plaza, and Witherspoon House. Who chooses and how? Is it RFQ? Anyway.
Do you want to?
Again, you have a lot of options. For instance, you could do an RFQ. In this situation, this seems to me more akin to, for instance, again, to use an example, the hospital redevelopment. And there, Plainsboro designated Princeton Healthcare System as the redeveloper of the property. Entered into a very comprehensive redevelopment agreement with the healthcare system that spelled out all of the obligations that Princeton Healthcare System had, and then obviously some of the obligations on the part of the town. I would assume that here, if you were to do a designation, you might want to actually designate the seminary as the redeveloper. It's the property owner, and that's who literally wants to redevelop the property. So that would be, in my opinion, logical to designate the seminary as the redeveloper and enter into an agreement with the seminary.
And then how much control over their choice of architect and on down we just sort of hand it over to them and
Yes.
they choose who
Yes.
does the actual design?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Based on
Based on the
information that
plan.
comes out of the plan.
Right, and this is where some towns want to have highly prescriptive plans for that very reason, so that they really know what they're getting.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, after the planning board meeting where we recommended this, I was sort of mulling things over and trying to think if there were any questions I should have asked. And the one that came to my mind, and I wonder if you can reflect on it a little bit, is in terms of the area of the study, it seems clear that all of the properties that were included in the study should have been there, but how did the study area get defined, and are there any other sections of the campus that perhaps should have been included as in the study?
There were some preliminary studies that the seminary had conducted for the area. Obviously, have been talking about the tenant campus, and so we identified those properties, and there's something relating to Erdman, and basically everything in between that touches those. We could have gone and included more homes on Mercer that they own, some of which could use some further improvement that I thought about after we were walking by them on the street, but we didn't. And then we also know that they had indicated that, the open space, the recreation field was sort of waning in use, and it's currently zoned, as I said, for single-family residential. Paying attention in Princeton, that seems to be a pretty in-demand use, so we thought it was an opportunity to add that as a potential gateway, open space, and however that might help to configure it. So we could have gone further. We actually tried to keep it somewhat limited, especially given that this tool hasn't been used before in Princeton.
Ms. Carmella?
Following up on, I gather from your question that there might be reasons to choose other areas, or, I mean,
Well,
is there a reason that some people, that, I guess, could the area be changed? now that we're voting on this? Or is the area, the definition and the boundaries, are they set in stone by what we're voting on? Yes.
Yes, you already set you set the
Okay.
boundaries when, back,
Okay.
I think it was in June
Okay.
when you sent this to the
Okay.
board. So if you wanted to expand it, you
Okay.
would go back, you would delineate a larger area or the additional areas
Okay.
and ask the planning board
I'm
to
not-
investigate those
Right.
additional
I was just
properties.
wondering what our options were. I don't have any my doubts about it myself.
Okay, I'd like to open it up to members of the public who are here, if it's okay with council. So please come on up to the microphone, and if you'd like to speak to it, and state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Brown, spelled just like the color brown, on 8 Edgehill Street. And when I first came to a meeting about this project, I was very worried about the 3 Stedman houses on the property. And since then, I've had some good discussions with the seminary, and I feel more optimistic, though I think you guys should definitely keep an eye on them. And I also feel the same way about Adams House. Now, I was happy with the way that the council and the seminary envisioned the process, which made provision for a lot of community feedback and seemed very concerned about, protecting the historic properties. I just learned in the past couple days something that troubled me quite a bit. And that is that there are at least 2 and possibly 3 lawsuits going forward, and from people in the neighborhood. And what especially troubles me is that neither I nor my next door neighbors have the slightest idea about what these lawsuits are about. And I'd hope for sort of a, how should I say, unified community and transparency. And once you get lawsuits, that leaves me as a resident, especially as a resident who doesn't want to start a lawsuit of her own, somewhat flummoxed, because I have no idea what motivates these people. They may be solely concerned about issues that only affect their own property, or they may be pushing the court to make decisions that would affect my home and the overall area. And I'm very puzzled about how to deal with it. And so I'm basically asking you as the council to bear this in mind and remember that there's a number of us who are quite public-spirited and would like to see this done in a peaceful way and love Princeton, love the old houses. And, we really do look to you for guidance. And I feel once, I can't stop people from suing, and they may have good reasons why, but once things get into the courts, and I believe in a couple of cases it's just one party suing, things can go on for years, and a judge might, after, dealing with a plaintiff, come to a conclusion that is not what most people in the town would want. So I'm basically throwing that at you and looking to you for wise advice. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we've received any lawsuit information, so it could just be someone is consulting an attorney and finding out their options. I don't know. We haven't received anything yet, so it hasn't gotten to that point. But we appreciate the heads up.
But I think what you're asking, and I feel for you, is that we all are cognizant that when a lawyer comes, they're not representing everyone, they're only representing a certain, and we will all remember that during this whole process.
I would just point out, with relationship to that, something that I asked at the planning board meeting. If we remember the Heinz Plaza project, that was also went to court over that, and you can see how that lawsuit turned out by driving down Witherspoon Street, so.
Joel Schwartz, One Armor Road. I live about a block away from the Great Lawn in front of Tenant Hall. As Councilman Quinn said, this was a long but a very comprehensive presentation, and I think it answered an awful lot of questions. It seems like the main question is, should the town and the seminary try to make this a better place by means of using the tools of conventional zoning or by using the more flexible tools of redevelopment? So as someone who has skin in the game, because I live so close to it, my answer is yes. I think that this is, the tools of redevelopment, I think, will give you a better chance, and the seminary a better chance, to come up with a better result. I also say that as someone who's a licensed architect and planner, and also a developer who's worked for 20 years in redevelopment. I've been a designated redeveloper, and I think that this is the right tool to solve what's really a complicated problem. We have an institution that's committed to wanting to stay in Princeton and needs to come up with a really complicated solution to a series of complicated problems, and I think this is the right way to go about doing it, and I'm glad we're taking this step. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to the resolution? Okay, I'm going to bring it back to council then. Are any further comments before we take a vote?
I just want to comment that as somebody who's not being on the planning board and this being new to me, I really appreciated the thorough way in which you explained the process and its applicability to these properties. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I had one quick question about what the timeline would look like for the planning board. So is this a year-long process before we come up with a plan, before a plan is developed, or I'm sure you're going to say that that's entirely up to us, but typically for a project like this, what's the timeline going forward?
I would recommend you try to keep it within a couple of months versus a year.
Okay.
I've been involved with a lot of public, and in process, I should go back for a second, in addition to the plan, the technical aspects. I think the process here is probably as important. Levels of stakeholder engagement is going to be critical, so you need to do that. There's probably, I'll call it, some sort of a big tent community event, because you have a site here that all 30,000 people in the community experience and probably have opinions on. So then we need to figure out what that process is, how to make it effective. But it's probably within a couple of months.
Thank you.
I think the public can follow the process better if it actually has a beginning and an end and it's short and it just doesn't get lost, in my experience.
Yeah.
So who is going to come up with the process?
Well, it looks like the resolution is directing the planning board to prepare the development plan.
Correct. And the good news is that you have cross-pollination since 2 council members sit on the planning board.
Right. Thank you for your service on this important project. Okay, have we already moved and seconded the resolution? All right, so is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll move it.
So it's been moved by Mr. Quinn.
I'll second.
And seconded by Ms. Crumiller. Any last words? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, resolution passes unanimously. And this is to be continued. So thank you. And thank you, everybody, for coming out for this. And now we're going to go back to 2018-24, the ordinance introduction and ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton establishing new neighborhood residential zoning standards and amending Chapter 17A of the Code of the Borough of Princeton, New Jersey, 1974, and Chapter 10B of the Code of the Township of Princeton, New Jersey, 1968. And again, I feel like we probably want to wait to do the formal introduction of this ordinance until our next meeting on October 22nd, because there were some comments from ZARC, and we might have some further comments tonight, but since Jim is here, it'd be great if you could go through a brief presentation of what's in this ordinance. And I also just want to compliment you and everybody involved in putting this together. This is the first graphic ordinance that Princeton has had, well, actually the university prepared one many, many years ago, but it never got to this stage. And it's, as a layperson, it's just, it's so much clearer when you see the picture of what the words mean. And hopefully this is a sign of things to come on how we do our zoning. So it's really great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, very quickly, this is obviously a major step in implementation of the goals of the Princeton Neighborhood Character and Zoning Initiative and the task force that's been meeting for, I guess, more than 2 years now, to really try to attempt to address the concerns of many residents and the impacts of home development in established neighborhoods. And so we looked, going back less than a year, but almost that, at provisions that could be harmonized, and there are provisions being harmonized with this. Missing provisions and new provisions. And so I'm not going to go through them in detail, but just indicate they include things such as requiring that homes be oriented and access to and from a public street, including walkways that attach to or connect to existing sidewalks. There are some provisions on facade articulation that limit how long a wall can be before it needs to step and shift, including the length of blank wall and articulation, which includes how long that wall can go, and the amount of having some minimum amount of windows and doors within it. Provisions, the big one that came out of the Neighborhood Character and Zoning Initiative was to focus on front-facing garages, or what we call front entry garages, and allowing limiting those to 1 or 2 bays, having some provisions if they're attached to the principal structure to step back, limiting how wide they can be so that basically you don't have new homes with garages that overpower the streetscape. Other provisions regarding side and rear entry garages, including some step-back provisions, special provisions with where garages and driveways can be located on corner lots. Right now, somebody could place a driveway leading to a garage at the corner, and so this basically guides them to pull it further back to the part of the lot that's furthest from the corner. There's provisions dealing with narrow lots, particularly some flexible provisions for lots 50 feet or less in the R7, R8, R9 zoning districts of the former township and the R3 and 4 zoning districts of the former borough. Some of those allow for some incentives if you take that garage, porte-cochere, carport, and push it back behind the main body of the house. We provide flexibility for some what I call the floating garage, where it can extend into side yards within some reasonable constraints. We allow for and provide guidance for motor court garages on large lots that you find a lot of those in the western section and also backing up to Carnegie Lake. But you have newer examples where the garage is oriented in a very different way than those, I'll call it the classic motor court homes. So provisions on driveway location and design, and some other provisions where U-shaped driveways are being used. And then there are some very flexible provisions for narrow and non-conforming lot conditions, where we're basically allowing for some existing conditions right now that are non-conforming. This is particularly affecting smaller lots in the R9 township zone and the R4 borough zone, where you have less than 6,000 square feet, less than 60 feet in width. There's a huge number of lots that are non-conforming. Right now, they need variances to do anything. This allows for flexibility for those homes to be expanded, altered, enlarged within reason. There's some guidance provided. You need some portion of setbacks and provisions. But as I think I said back in our public meetings in April, this goes really to the heart of housing affordability in those neighborhoods where right now the most affordable homes are non-conforming. They're on a lot that's too small, a lot that's too narrow. They have these conditions that don't meet the zoning requirements, but you can't expand them without going through a huge arduous process. So this provides some flexibility in that regard. And then there's some minor adjustments on a couple of different provisions throughout the code that I won't go into. New provisions relative allowing some permitted projections, addressing dormers within the height to setback ratio, and some provisions addressing both floor area and pervious coverage on single-family and two-family homes, including some flexibility and relief if you push that garage or portico share or carport or another accessory structure behind the main dwelling. So I think that probably summarizes at a very high level. Oh, and we've redefined height because that was one of the other issues raised by the task force. So we're kind of grounding it into the pre-existing grade or the finished grade, whichever is lower, so that the mounding effects that have been such concern in certain neighborhoods will at least have some cap on how far you can mound in total height.
You know, could you turn off the screen just because it's a little distracting?
Sorry.
So Mayor, are we just, or
I
we're not
would
doing,
s-
we're not taking any action now?
I would recommend, just because I believe that there's work that staff is still doing to.
Okay. And it is a late
Is that
hour.
right? I thought.
There were just those comments that we had received on Friday that Chris Cosenza summarized in his memo, and that's all that we've gotten since I transmitted the ordinance to you guys.
We received today, council received today from Marina, who's in the back there.
Oh, I see on the floor there.
Okay.
Okay, well then, I mean, I think we can introduce, but I'd like to open it up for.
I mean, it seems like we've come this far, when we can take action, we
Right.
should, right?
Yeah, definitely. I just
I
thought.
I guess the only, what I can't recall is did we need to make changes in response to the comments that we received from Wanda on Friday?
No, our memo addressed that they're
But we did say in the beginning of the
Covered.
meeting that we weren't going to take action. So I'm a
Okay,
little
that's my
hesitant.
fault. Okay.
No, I mean, I hesitate.
I did. I said, yeah. That's why I pushed it later.
Then can we not spend
also.
another minute on it, or?
Well, I just want to make sure that if there are any changes, that we get them changed for the next meeting, so we're introducing something that then we don't need to amend.
And I have a
So-
comment. I have a little concern, so I don't
Okay.
know when we're going to get to those.
So why don't we go with your concern? Why don't we start with that? Then we're going to open it up if there's anybody who wants to say their piece, and then we can
Okay.
move on to the rest of the agenda.
I just like more kind of reasoning for the U-shaped driveways. You know, if you look at the example on page 19, that it seems like it compromises the walkability, you know, and I just don't really know the purpose for it, except if it was on a busy, I can understand if it's done for safety reasons on a busy street, but on a non-busy street, I feel like cars are going to park in that U-shape and mar the beauty of the street, you know, which is what I don't like. I mean, why I don't like front yard parking, and I feel like, why are we encouraging that? Is there a reason?
Right. Well, it is a pattern that you can find, as I mentioned before, in the western section. There's some homes
I
on
know.
Lodge Road that have it.
I know, and supposedly, you know, I don't know, there's some reason to think that's nice, but the people there park their car right in front of their front porch. So I just don't understand why we think it's a good thing.
Yeah. There are also homes up on the lake, that back to the lake in particular, you can find a number of them with U-shaped driveways. So we recognized it was a design pattern that exists, and we basically tried to provide at least some regulations of dealing with it. Because right now, somebody can try to wedge a U-shaped driveway onto a very narrow lot that does not accommodate it. So we at least tried to set a minimum of 100 feet. I know there's some discussion about whether that might want to be a little larger.
But it seems like, why are we, it's just like we do have a lot of front-facing garages that are in the town too, and we decided we're going to do away with those if possible going forward. So why I mean, do you think that it's a nice pattern, the U shape in the front? I just want to, I'm trying to understand, because to me, ugh, I don't like them. But maybe everybody else thinks they look elegant or something. I mean, is that it? The people think they look elegant? I'm trying to understand, because it's adding another curb cut that people have to walk across when they're walking down the street. It seems like it goes directly against all the other rules that we're making.
Right. Well, we have a new rule that keeps that curb cut narrower than it's been before. So it can't be a double width opening at each end. It has to basically be down at the minimum that we require, or the maximum that we allow at the
But
opening.
I'm just asking your opinion. Like, do you think they look elegant?
Well,
or-
I don't know if that's the appropriate question. I think part of the motivation.
I just don't understand.
I think part of the motivation is to try to capture what is there traditionally on a lot of blocks. I mean, I think we're calling this neighborhood character, and so there are some neighborhoods where this is part of the character of the neighborhood, and you don't want to be creating cases where the sort of older housing stock is now out of compliance with the ordinances. I mean, to answer your question, it's less of a aesthetic endorsement than saying, like, this is what's there. And so, I mean, I think
Are they allowed right now? They are allowed?
Where, I mean, and is the difference that the forward garages, that's more of a newer thing that we're reacting to? Is that the distinction? So that makes sense. I think that's what you're saying, Mayor, right? That
And this does prevent someone with a house like mine, which is small, from putting a circular driveway in if they wanted to add a third car.
Correct.
And the circular driveway would count towards their impervious cover limit?
Yes.
So they have trade-offs, right?
Okay.
And they still need to recess the garage if they don't use a motor court treatment. So there's sort of, again, additional design regulations that don't exist today.
Are there other comments or questions from council before we open it up? All right. Marina, would you like to speak? Thank you for bearing with us. I know it's late.
Good evening. I have extra copies. Would anybody like to see the extra copies?
I think we all got your
You already
email.
got them,
Yeah.
right? Oh. So having been to many of Jim's presentations, I was really grateful to see this all coming together as one document and hopefully being done by the end of the year. Very exciting. So I have two minor comments that I hope could be incorporated, discussed, or explained. So the first one is I think it's a great proposal, I think that we had this sort of encouraging the carrots and sticks, so providing carrots for people who would push garages back, not counting towards FAR. Then that went away, causing all the garages forward. So now we're sort of bringing back the incentives. So I think that those incentives are great, and this one gets to one of those incentives where people whose lots are pretty narrow are allowed to put them sort of closer to the property line, therefore having more yard. But having looked at sort of the area, you see that it's limited by two things. It's limited by the zone, which are the sort of the central zones in town where the lots are smaller, and it's also limited by the 50-foot width. But if you look at an actual map, this was just me this afternoon looking at the map of, you see this is Jefferson, Moore, Hathorne, Hamilton, and Spruce, and these are the places where people already have these garages in the back. And this 50-foot limit, you know, just prohibited this for so many people, especially look at those people on Spruce, right on the bottom, where they're all basically with these little lots because they're they oriented the long way parallel to the street. Now they can't do this. So I think it's a great rule, but I'm not sure that this 50-foot limit is helping anybody. It just seems like you're already limiting it by zone. And this is just an extra complexity that, you know, wouldn't allow this great incentive for a lot of people. So brought that to your attention. And the second one is the definition of height limit. I really appreciate all the work that was done sort of at the bottom of the houses to figure out how do people not pile up things to make them look taller. But then going back to this, how do we incentivize what it is that we want to achieve? How do we measure the top? So there were two definitions, one in the borough, one in the township, and maybe Jim will do a better job of explaining that. But the township always measured to the highest point, but in the township, it's not so much of an issue. But in the borough, where people are, narrower and trying to build taller, it was measured, if you have a flat roof, it's to the top of the roof, but if you have as you could see, this house on Madison, these Victorians with towers and funny roofs and excitement, it was measured to the middle point of the roof. Therefore, effectively encouraging these interesting roofs. So I'm just, I'm fine either way. I do a lot of crazy roofs. I could, work either way, but I just wanted to make sure that we understand it's sort of like we used to have an incentive for setting the garages back. The soon we took it away, we ended up with garages in the front. This is sort of how we just put the language together incentivizes certain things. So just wanted you to think about that, but thank you.
Thank you for
Happy
those comments.
to answer, explain.
What curious, like Jim's response to that, now that the bell is rung.
Well, first on the height issue, I spoke to Derek earlier, and there is a permitted height. Yeah.
They're like spears, and it's limited to chimneys and cupolas, that type of stuff. So
Yeah, so you could expand that provision to allow for more height exceptions that are more, I'll call it, articulations versus space. Because as I look at this, it looks like the house is probably within the 35 feet. Just the tower is over?
Sorry. Well, Derek knows the house, but the peak of the house itself is also over, and the tower is obviously over. So we were doing an addition in the back, but I just happened to notice that these big stately houses, they just happen to be, vertically oriented. So even though, I would say if you want to maybe think about that or allow some provision for that, or just, it's sort of the language, the way it states.
Yeah, I think, we understand your point. Mr. Cohen? did you-
Yeah, I just wanted to respond. Marina approached me about this a little while ago, and my initial reaction was, but we want to try and get a united definition of building height, and so, we've adjusted the allowable heights, I think, in the former borough to, allow how, after thinking about it, I actually agree with Marina, and I don't see why you couldn't actually go the other direction and have a single definition that was the borough's former definition, and that, in fact, in the township where you might then be concerned the buildings would get too high, we've got other controls on that, like our height to setback regulations, which don't allow a tall house to get too close to the property line. You can also just, in a zone-by-zone basis, adjust what height is allowed. So, in the former borough, you can have a higher building height than in former township zones. So I don't know if you'd like to respond to that, Jim, but I think that the crux of Marina's point is accurate, that when you measure to the midpoint of a roof instead of to the peak, you're encouraging not flat roofs, but rather sloped roofs, which are in character with most of the neighborhoods in town.
Can I add one comment to that you can then respond to? Is that in my neighborhood there is what we not so affectionately refer to as the turret house. That is a recent development. You may know the house. I don't want to call it out too specifically, but that is very recent construction. And so this would be, this obviously is under the borough rules, so I'm not sure it always works like the house on Madison. And I'd want us to think about that, you know. It just doesn't fit in at all. It looks totally unusual and I assume is taking advantage of that borough rule. This is 2-year-old construction.
Yeah, we were also trying to provide something that was easier for Derek to enforce because the mean.
No, we were trying to get one definition versus the mean, because the township's to the top. And we did hear complaints about the township houses getting bulldozed and these giant McMansions too high. And part of that was because there was just height to setback and there was no height. So if you don't have a height and you have height to setback, you get these trapezoidal, pyramidal shaped houses. So, I mean, David's point's well taken. If you want to do 2 standards, that's fine. We were trying to get to a, you know.
But going more with the borough standard than with the township standard. I wasn't suggesting 2 standards.
The question did come up, how many places was exceeding would exceed the 35 feet, and you're actually shedding some light because we were struggling identifying. Most zoning does use a 35-foot height limit for residential, but you also could set an exact distance and perhaps make it 40 or 45, but then you're going to have issues raising concerns in the township, former township.
Well, Jim, did you just mention, like briefly, I heard you say, could we do something to encourage articulation? Because it seems to me that no matter what the height is, based on what I've seen, developers will build within inches of that. Like in the township, they just build it up like this, like they do the calculation and build it just that high. And so no matter what height we say, we're going to get taller buildings that are just maximizing space. So is there a way to solve this problem? I mean, you said, I thought maybe you had an idea. Do you have an idea what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I mean, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, we could take another stab at the height and take another look and see if there's a way to come up with something. I mean, part of it also, I think, is a sustainability issue, which is you do want to allow for height and for construction that is allowed to stay within that envelope and go up. And you do have a generational thing occurring where a lot of the single and 1.5-story homes that were built primarily in that decade or 2 after World War II are being replaced by taller homes, more compact within the footprint, more energy efficient.
But I think there's an example at the end of Prospect where someone used the height to setback ratio to essentially put a widow's watch up at the top so that they would have a view of the lake over the houses that are on the other side who back on the lake. And it's this big house that's surrounded by 2 ranches. So that, to me, speaks for a clearer definition and for more restriction on height, personally.
And that could be one of those zones where you don't have height. It's just the height to setback, where you have the lines like that lead to, if you have a good-sized lot, you can have a very tall house. I mean, we can look at a couple different options.
I'm trying to piece together what everybody is saying up here so we can give some clear direction, and I'm having a tough time.
We could go back to what we have now, the borough standard for the borough. I mean, all I heard was complaints in the township when the houses got torn down. Oh, these huge houses, they're too tall, and then
right.
And then the borough.
Can I make a suggestion? Sorry. So I think what effectively is happening is the borough height limit went down with these new regulations while the township height limit went up, which is the reverse of what I think you were trying to do. So I would say if you apply one consistent rule, hopefully the borough rule all over, but have maybe 2 different height limits. Because in the center of town, like it used to be, the borough definition could just stay the same as it was in the 35 feet, and then in the township, same definition, but dropped to 30. And then it used to be 30 in the township anyway, so nobody's going to be upset. But that way, the definition is consistent throughout, but the height is different as the town sort of supposed to be stepping down. That could be.
Well,
but-
could it be done by
Directions,
zones rather than Old Borough
Right.
Township lines?
Right, I mean, we have different side yard setbacks in different
All the
zones. I
time,
don't see
right.
why you wouldn't have a different height in different zones as well.
Just a point of clarification, Marina's correct that in several of the township zones, the height limit was 30. This ordinance would increase it to 35. But then there were at least, I think, 4 zones where there was no height limit at all in the township, and this would actually impose a 35-foot height limit.
Right, okay. Well, I'm just trying to get a sense from everybody what the feeling is. I mean, I feel that if it was 30 feet before, raising it to 35 is going to upset people. And I don't know, I'm intrigued by this idea of having the same definition, but 2 limits depending on the zone and appropriateness.
Yeah, but the problem is one's to the top and one's to the mean. So the mean is a messy way to measure height, in my opinion. I don't know, Jim, welcome to chime in, but if you have a line to the top of the house, it's clear. It's 30
Right.
feet or, so I don't know if you want to go like Marina suggested, you could go higher in the borough, but it's easier if you go to the top. I mean,
Right.
sometimes I get a flat roof, I get a gable roof, I get a, a hip roof, and you're doing all these different calculations.
Right.
I mean, that's just, if you had a single definition, you have to either go to the top or the mean point. And that's why we were just trying to find a happy medium in between that wouldn't upset the apple cart,
But, I mean, I'll just say, Mayor, that I feel like what I consistently hear is these things just seem totally, the new houses seem out of scale to the existing houses, right?
Right.
And I'd rather us err on the side of being careful and preventing gaming, right? I mean, what's going to prevent more gaming?
well, we'll be back here to deal with gaming in a year or 2, I'm sure, because it's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a lot of smart architects in town, and it's tough to get everything, in one sweep.
That lovely house that Marina showed us a picture of, I don't think, that's not what's getting built. I don't think we're going to be precluding that.
No, but I think we
Oh,
could potentially
well,
be
we would.
incentivizing flat roofs.
Right. Yeah, and I think that, a lot of the objections to increasing height, they're in neighborhoods like Ewing Street, where all there were Cape Cods, and none of these regulations are going to stop those from turning into 2-story houses. So the character of those neighborhoods is going to change unless we do something much more drastic than this.
Is there a way to measure the height in a simple way, but somehow given a small incentive to not having a flat roof? I mean, do we want to discourage flat roofs? I
Well, I
don't
mean-
even
I think,
know.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Necessarily, you need a membrane roof, it's just more expensive than shingled roof, fiberglass shingles. It's not,
It seems to me that a lot of thought went into this, and we probably only want an architect up here. I'm not willing to substitute my judgment for the expertise of.
Well, the other thing I might recommend is, like, with this, I don't know if we want to get together the committee one more time to just deal with the height piece of it, or we just go with what's here. I'm tired.
I think that's a good idea, Liz. Because I feel like Jim, I think he has a kernel of an idea, and I'd like to let him have the idea percolate.
Okay.
See what he comes up with.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
But the other one.
Oh, I can, I'd like to answer that. I think, it seems like what you're saying is you want to allow wider houses, right? Because that's the gist of it, that the garages get to be closer to the edge of the property when the property is narrow. So if the property is wider, you want to still allow the garage to be close to the edge, right?
Not much, but yes. So what I think this does, it encourages this sort of, and especially if you look at the picture, this is Jim's picture, right? When these garages are in the side yard, they are, the way the language is written, and it's written really well, they're encouraged to be smaller. So it allows, even if the house is wider, but it creates this sort of variation in height. And I think that having, you know, and it works really well already on Jefferson and Moore. It's like the best example of it, right? You can see on the map all the little dots of people having these garages in their backyards, and they're right up against the property line. So to say that not allowing them to do it as part of neighborhood character is a little bit counterintuitive, because, you know, if their lot is 52 feet wide and their neighbor's lot is 50 feet wide, you know, how are they different?
But the only ones that are like that are the old ones. If they were building them now, they wouldn't be like that. They would be wide. And that's why I think it's good. I
But
thought
they
Jim's...
won't be, because what Jim is proposing has eliminated. That's not allowed anymore. That's it. We're done, right? He already wrote it the way that they have to be pushed back. There are all these incentives for pushing them
No,
back.
I'm talking about the house itself.
But this is only garage related. This is not the house related at all.
Okay.
This is purely just having a garage that's set back, not
I see what you're saying.
nothing to do with the
Right,
house
but
at
it's
all.
pushing the garage.
Yes.
Yeah, I
and-
think
mean,
Jim wants to respond to
Yeah,
it.
so the issue here was simply one of, if you had a conforming lot, should we be providing this additional flexibility, this floating garage that lets you go out into the setback? And I think the feeling was, as we worked this through, if you have a conforming lot, you should try to comply, even though you have lots of pre-existing non-conforming situations. So it wasn't really so much about trying to pull all those non-conformities in as much as it was really trying to provide relief to the undersized lot and giving more flexibility to that undersized. Could the 50 become 60? It could. Should it go all the way out to all of those districts? Well, then basically you're creating an entire new standard. You're not
Right.
just providing
Well,
the relief to the
right.
undersized
I
lot.
just want to make sure, it's almost 11 o'clock now, so I'm going to give Kip a chance because she's been standing there patiently. But thank you for your input on this, and we do have another couple weeks to consider.
Kip Cherry, 24 Dempsey. I wish you all would come around and look at the brand-new house that's going up in our neighborhood. We worked with Derek very hard on it. I hired an attorney with a neighbor. We got the setback in place, but we ended up with a garage door facing Terhune. That's all that's facing Terhune is a garage door and a tiny little
Front door.
front door, correct? Yeah, it also is
Just like
within
the
a few
Valley
hundred
Red
feet of
houses.
Mr. Cohen's house. And what we would have liked to have gotten is the house reoriented so that it actually faced Dempsey Avenue, and we would have liked to have gotten the garage moved around to Dempsey Avenue, and then people could have entered the garage from Dempsey Avenue. Instead, they've got to stick their nose out into Terhune, and it's rather dangerous. And so it's just a bizarre house because it's very narrow and deep. And it's not what I would have designed if I had been allowed to design something. And the owners, or Mr. Grasso said, well, if you had spoken up earlier, we could have come up with something in, negotiation. But, we tried, and in fact, Derek caught a few mistakes along the way, and it did make it better once we got things in better arrangement, but we still didn't end up with what we want. And the real big problem is it's very tall, and it's on a slope. And I'm hung up on these slopes, you're hung up on these slopes, and yet we still ended up with a slope. The driveway is clearly going up to the garage. They did agree to put in a discharge system for the stormwater because it was going to be rushing out of the driveway. But I don't think we've gotten there yet, and I wish you all would look at that because we made an effort, but we're not there. And I'm sure somebody will buy it, and I'd be very happy in it because they don't know any different. But I think it could have been a better house. And it's right next to the neighbor, which is a little house, and it's overshadowing their backyard, and stealing their sunlight. And I just don't think it's right. So.
Right. Okay, thank you. This is a difficult process to put together rules that are going to work in all cases.
But this ordinance would prevent that in the future. So
Okay.
that, to me, that's the good news
Right,
and
okay,
the argument
good.
of why we need to move.
basically.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
This,
Yeah.
I mean, that house is a showcase of all the things that aren't allowed in the new ordinance. I mean, enough said.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay. I just want to bring it back so that we're all in agreement on what the next steps are before the next meeting. It seemed like the main issue that there was still some discussion about was the height question. And maybe we should, after this meeting, I just can't really think straight right now about whether we should bring the subcommittee together again or whether Jim just wants to work on it and float it with a few of us to see what we want to bring back here on the 22nd. Does that make sense? Okay. Is that all right with everybody? Okay.
Talking about what subcommittees are, or?
No, there's a neighborhood character
Characters.
subcommittee.
Oh, okay,
so either
great.
that group, or I think it's just Jim could come up with something and maybe talk to, I would say, a few council
Okay.
people, maybe Tim and David and Jenny. As mostly the members, the council members of the neighborhood character group. Okay,
Sure.
great. All right, thank you. We still have quite a bit of agenda to get through. We have our resolutions, 18337, resolution authorizing the award of a construction contract with S Brothers Incorporated of South River, New Jersey, in the not-to-exceed amount of $2,987,198.05 for the Cherry Valley Road East Improvement Project.
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Moved by Mr. Cohen, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. Any questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And I just want to thank Ms. Stockton for moving this project forward. It was complicated because there are many parties involved, but I know the neighbor is going to be excited to see this moving forward. 18338, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Straight Edge Striping of Bound Brook, New Jersey, in the not-to-exceed amount of $28,702.90, and encumber a total amount of $31,000 for pavement markings and striping services in various locations on municipal roads and parking lots. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Quinn, seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 18339, resolution requesting the investigation of Nassau Street, New Jersey State Highway 27, traffic signals from Bayard Lane, US Route 206, through Washington Road, Van Deventer Avenue, by the New Jersey Department of Transportation, and committing to provide the required 25% municipal contribution. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll move.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Fraga, seconded by Ms. Krummeller, and I just wanted to note that this 25% contribution is required by DOT, and that the university has offered, if we request the money that was set aside for the MOU, that it can be applied. Oh, yep, Ms. Applegate.
I'm sorry, I couldn't, Kristen Applegate, Princeton University, I couldn't see the items on the agenda because it wasn't coming up online, but I just wanted to clarify that the 25% is not guaranteeing full payment.
Right.
It's up to the maximum amount of what's in the balance of what remains from the $450,000 that was committed in the memorandum of understanding. Since we don't know what your 25% might be, I just wanted to be clear that the university is saying if we go through the proper channels of exchanging letters, so to speak, that we would make available what's left in that balance. It may not cover it, but I just wanted to be clear there's a limit.
Right, no, we understand that.
Okay.
And I assume you don't want the letter until we know what the amount is?
Not necessarily. I mean, we
Okay.
can do an up to, but not more than.
Okay.
Because it would probably be good for you to have that document, good for us to have the documentation.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
Great,
last
all right,
time we
can
did it by
work on that.
council resolution.
Okay,
And a letter from the university, so, thank you.
okay, thanks, Kristen.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Next is 18340, resolution amending the shared services agreement with Municipality of Princeton, Princeton Public School District, and Princeton Public Library, setting the municipal contribution for a network support specialist through June 30th, 2019. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mr. Quinn and seconded by Ms. Krummeller. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Resolution passes unanimously. Now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of routine nature, passed by single vote. Are there any items anyone would like removed from the consent agenda? Seeing no one, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Cohen and seconded by Mr. Quinn. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.